Fantasmagorium show is proud to present Guns, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. I love saying that. Roughly 60 years ago, movies were changed by two men who acquired the cinematic rights to Ian Fleming's James Bond, Albert Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. In the well-documented history, producers have exited from the franchise, but there has always been a family thread of the Broccolis. When Cubby passed, Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli took the reins. The Eon production company championed one of the most successful family businesses in history, shepherding England's gentleman spy through ups and downs, through studios, successes and failures. Today, that particular arrangement has changed, as we will discuss the most modern, tenuous nature of the phrase James Bond will return. My name is Scotty R37. My opposite number cat is here. Steve is going to expect us to talk. We're happy to have Agent Double D09. Is it D09 or 009? One. And we may be joined by our very own Felix Leiter. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Nothing like a bombshell on a Thursday, huh?
No doubt.
Yeah, I was a bit confused, but then I started reading the article. I'm like, okay, now it makes sense in a way.
Well, and we will get into it, but for anybody who happens to not be in the know, I did want to just sort of go through the article. Amazon seizing creative control of James Bond sparks fandom fears. I do enjoy the fear mongering right off the hop, Hollywood Reporter. Thank you, James Hibbard. Amazon's TV and movie track record is causing fandom worries about Bond's future. Quite possibly the worst thing to happen to the franchise. Tell us what you really feel. For the last 4 years, James Bond fans have been hunting for any sign that a new James Bond movie was gaining momentum following the exit of lead Daniel Craig. Thursday's news that Amazon had struck a deal with Bond rights holders Broccoli and Wilson to seize creative control of the franchise means long-time boggy stalemate between the two parties is over, and the new Bond will assuredly move forward. So why are so many acting like Amazon just beat the living daylights out of 007? Best-selling author Don Winslow wrote on X, absolutely heartbreaking, the end of an era. Film speak critic Griffin Schiller opined, this is quite possibly the worst thing to happen to this franchise. It'll be milked dry. Predicted another, unnamed, Amazon is going to scrape the barrel here and be as shameless as possible. Plenty of others have written, rest in peace, James Bond.
Oh boy.
And, well, we are joined. Make the Empire great again. It is good to see you, Robert Meyer Burnett, fellow James Bond aficionado and expert.
Yes.
Well, thank you. It's Catherine reached out to me. How could I not talk about this day?
Right.
It's funny. I was just posting James Bond memories on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's 7:30." No, yeah, it's interesting.
Well,
I mean,
I do want to say, because I think that we're not within the first 10 minutes, but Kat posted as soon as we got this information that it was.
You guys been on for a long time.
No. We've been on for 4 minutes and 11 seconds.
Okay.
But he's about to curse.
I'm not going to. I won't. Don't worry.
Mr. Foley, how are you?
It was effity FFF, and my response initially was effity FFF, but then I was thinking, there's a couple provisos here. Before I start going, the sky is falling, is it possible that this could possibly be handled properly or well even?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking anybody who wants to answer.
Well, here's the thing. The James Bond franchise is not a franchise of unparalleled excellence. It is hit and miss at best. And it started out as a tone-setting franchise in the early 60s. The first Bond film was 62. and you're dealing with the American middle class that was created in the 1950s and the rest of the world in the wake of World War II. And the Bond movies were a product of the same era that gave us the first Playboy clubs. And James Bond was the ultimate male fantasy for all of those young men who fought in World War II. They came home and set up nesting situations with their wives and raised kids. And they go into the 60s, and suddenly here's a male fantasy figure that's jet setting and traveling around the world and has the gadgets, has the women, has enough. The man was, the thing about James Bond was he was a man. He was a man who drank in life because any day would end his. So he knew everything that was great about the world. He knew how to drink champagne at the perfect temperature. He knew what the best caviar was. He made love to the greatest women, because why would you not? If your job entailed the world ending and you dying, why wouldn't you be the ultimate connoisseur of life? That's what Bond, he was the ultimate fantasy figure. And in the 60s, he defined the era, and the Bond franchise was, people don't realize today how incredibly mad the world was for Bond in the 60s. I mean, they had 24-hour shows of Goldfinger when it opened. And then, as we moved out of the 60s and the world changed, I mean, Bond made a joke about how he couldn't listen to the Beatles. So moving into the 60s, moving out of the 60s into the 70s, Bond was chasing its tail. The James Bond franchise became, I mean, Live and Let Die is a blaxploitation movie. And Man with the Golden Gun is a martial arts film. And neither one of them are either a good blaxploitation movie or a good martial arts film. And then in 77 with Spy Who Loved Me, it discovered fantasy. I mean, not that You Only Live Twice and Thunderball weren't fantastical, but it went full on underwater cities and Hugo Drax's orbital platform and Moonraker and all that. And then it had to come back. It had to pull back in 81 with For Your Eyes Only. And then the Bond franchise, in my mind, was really relevant in the 60s and then became a staple of cinema in the 70s and on, and then reinvented itself by giving Bond a emotional component with Daniel Craig, but it didn't lead to great Bond movies. There's one and a half great Bond movies in the Craig era. Yeah. I'm a quantum apologist, but I would say that Spectre and No Time to Die are not high points in the franchise, but still it represents 1962 to 2000. What did No Time 2021. So yeah, it's been 4 years. It used to be, I mean, Bond was a 2-year until the great break of 6 years between 89 and 95 because of the Kevin McClory bullshit that was going on forever. But
that was also when they faced MGM faced an aggressive corporate takeover at that time.
Yeah.
And it took them a few years to get out of it, and they ended up being bankrupt, and that took quite a while.
Yeah, and the Bond franchise was stuck. It was moribund. And it's funny because now, look, they got, if you read Deadline today, they made $1 billion deal with Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson. $1 billion. Whether it was cash or whether it was stock options. Michael Wilson's 80? They're both sons of Albert Broccoli. They're half brothers and sisters, and it's been the family business. I mean, hell, man, how much do you have to do in your life? $1 billion.
Right.
Yeah.
They probably made $1 billion with all the history of the saga.
Well, no, they made more. Yeah, they made a ton. That's why it's such a.
Yeah.
But it's. I mean, they had to pay,
and they only gave up creative control. They still own the rights to the name.
They own half of the franchise. Yeah, they own half from Amazon.
And they're in. Have you read about the lawsuit with the other guy there?
Yes, I brought that up a couple days ago. Yes.
Yeah.
God, please enlighten us.
And I couldn't believe it reading that lawsuit. I'm like, really?
So basically, this Austrian billionaire who's building this massive resort in Dubai is trying to exploit a copyright law in the UK, which states that if you have not exercised your copyright in certain departments after 5 years, then you can lose that copyright if it's challenged. Now, I would assume, being a billionaire, that he got his own legal team and all that who looked into this and wouldn't be wasting his time if he didn't think he had a legitimate shot at taking it. And I want, and that's obviously not something that just happened like yesterday. I mean, they broke the news about it, but I wonder if that racked up the pressure, because the thing I was looking at when they broke the news today is like, well, why now? Because if Barbara and Michael genuinely wanted to retire and do other things, then it's like, why not do that 3 years ago when they bought the company? And like, you know, No Time to Die is you're done with Daniel Craig. You have other things you want to do. Let the new guys shepherd it. And I started thinking that maybe there was a lot more validity to that Wall Street Journal article from a couple months ago than we thought. And it's like the stalemate's there. They can't get past it. It's like Amazon's not budging. They don't want to budge either. And now we have a lawsuit coming because we're not doing anything and we could potentially lose the copyright. And Amazon's like, okay, we'll back up the Brinks truck. Because years ago, it was said by Barbara and Michael that whenever they were going to retire, they were going to hand the reins over to Greg, who is Michael's son. He's been an associate producer in all the films since The World Is Not Enough. And he doesn't give a lot of interviews. And they said that, and Barbara and Michael said that was deliberate because they're like, yeah, we're the faces of the franchise right now. But when we're done, it's going to be his turn. And I thought it was just unlikely that Greg would have just changed his mind and says, nah, I'm good. I don't want to take this over. So I'm thinking he was in agreement with Barbara and Michael about what they wanted the franchise to be. And that Wall Street Journal article was probably pretty accurate. And now, well, we want to trust the algorithm to pick the new actor instead of picking semi-unknowns. We want to do spin-offs. We want to do this and that. We need to think about longevity, which is the thing that's really struck out at me in that article, because it's like, it's been around for 60 years. What are you talking about longevity? Yeah. But I'm wondering if that has a lot to do with, I mean, I know Barbara and Michael put a positive spin on it, but they're kind of obligated to do so since they gave him cut him $1 billion check. But I think that's like, yeah, they couldn't get past this stalemate. And so it's like, Amazon's going to do what they want now. And yeah, there's going to be positives to that. Like, they're going to get things moving. It's not going to be the era of 6-year waits is over. They might revamp the website. I did find out that they've already sent out missives to all of the brands associated with it saying, don't worry, your contracts are still in place. We're not terminating anything. Just sit tight while they figure out what they're going to do.
Well,
so there's that.
What's interesting, Hot Toys, my favorite action figure brand, announced a branding deal for Bond a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that, which is fascinating that they're doing that, which is great. I mean, it's funny because Bond, like Star Trek, is I think a brand in terms of appealing to collectors. They've never really figured it out. I mean, X06 with Star Trek is doing these figures, but the Bond franchise, especially now, Sideshow was making great figures. Big Chief, until they went out of business, they did a great series of Bond figures. But I think a lot of people, here's the thing, and I hate to say this, the James Bond franchise means nothing to anybody under 40. It really doesn't. And as much as I'm loath to say that, Bond is no different than Mission Impossible. I mean, if you think about it, the Mission Impossible franchise began, what, in 94? With the first, was it 94?
96.
Yeah. 96. A year after GoldenEye came out. So, and there had been a 6-year gap there. So, we're now at the 30th anniversary of GoldenEye that came out. So if you're 40, you were like 10 years old. GoldenEye, there hadn't been a Bond film in the theater for 6 years. So the very first James Bond movie you ever saw in the theater, if you're 40, was probably GoldenEye. And
sorry to interrupt.
No, and so if that's the case, I mean, you didn't grow up watching the ABC Sunday Night Movie and seeing James Bond movies. You didn't. So the James Bond franchise does not have some legendary mythical status in your mind. It was just another film franchise. And none of those movies, as much as I enjoyed GoldenEye, it was an action movie. It didn't blow anybody's doors off. It wasn't The Matrix, which came out 4 years later. And unfortunately, the Bond franchise has not been transcendent since the 60s. I mean, it became ordinary. And I think nowadays, like the Daniel Craig movies, you can point to Skyfall and say that was $1 billion grossing film, which is great. You know, and I love Casino Royale. I like Quantum of Solace. I do not like Skyfall, even though it made $1 billion, because it's a movie where James Bond fails in every part of the film. And then Spectre and No Time to Die are cobbled together, beautifully made, unsuccessful projects. Like, why no one's going to look at Spectre or No Time to Die and be like, oh my God, those movies are so good.
There's one guy.
Well, they're wrong.
Well, and I appreciate your scorn, but no, I do think that, like, what, No Time to Die made $775 million, like, not the $1 billion. I know that's the
Spectre,
benchmark.
less than No Time
Sure,
to.
sure, but also a pandemic release. Like, I had to go see it in the drive-in in November to be able to get into a theater.
No Time to Die is a movie where they kill the main character, and at the end of the credits it says James Bond will return,
which is exactly what I wanted, dude. That is exactly what I wanted. And I was talking to Steve about this just before, and it's like, had the Broccoli's and Eon Productions sort of petered out on their ideas or their passion on, or where to go forward from there. They had already sort of nixed going back to the 60s through the Tarantino pitch when they were thinking about.
Why go back to the 60s with a franchise that began in the 60s?
Well, and also we've seen through evidence that people got A Man from U.N.C.L.E., a movie, and it was based in the 60s, and that was a wet sandwich as far as audiences were concerned.
Right.
But I enjoyed that movie. Henry Cavill.
I love that movie. I think it's great.
Yeah, but it didn't do like a difference.
But there's 6 James Bond movies in the 60s?
Oh yeah.
You know, why would you go back to where the franchise already did that? I mean, if any, I just think that the James Bond franchise is a franchise that's finished.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think Amazon wants to make Bond accessible to a modern audience. The problem with that, and I'm going to use a term that coined by, I don't know who was coined by, but our buddy Todd Michael uses it all the time now. The in-shitification of pop culture, when these pop culture IPs, especially when these massive corporations buy them. So that's kind of the worry, right? That we're going to get, not only are we going to get lackluster movies, but then they're going to do TV shows and we're going to get, I don't know, we'll probably get
dilute the brand
prequels of Q in high school animation and all kinds of weird stuff.
Look, I've been saying this for years. I mean, I would love them to do a Spectre series. How did Spectre form in the wake of World War II, or maybe even earlier? Like Spectre formed in the 19th century or something, and it was a natural evolution that's something I could get behind.
Rob,
if you had somebody
see
like
the Agency on Paramount Plus?
Yeah.
So if they can make something like that,
well, here's the thing.
right?
Don't you think, like, I just watched the first episode of Reacher season 3 last night. There's a lot of really great spy, thriller, political shows that are being made now.
Yeah.
And Amazon, look, I'm sorry, but Jonathan Nolan created Fallout. Fallout's a terrific show.
Amazing.
He's Chris Nolan's brother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had problems with Westworld, of course, but I mean, he's a guy that if Amazon already has a creator, if he came out and said, we're going to do Bond, like I've often joked that a movie like Presumed Innocent, 1990, Alan Pakula, one of the great political thriller directors of all time, makes a movie from Scott Turo's legal thriller that stars Harrison Ford and Raul Julia and Brian Dennehy and Greta Scacchi, has a score by John Williams. What did they do? They turned that into an 8-episode TV series with Jake Gyllenhaal in 2024.
How was it?
It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. It just, the form of movies, the 2-hour form of storytelling is a form that I really love. And what they're going to do now is they're going to turn everything into the Reacher. They're adapting books, but they're taking one book and turning it into an 8-episode season.
See, that's the problem I have with it, because it's like, there's a lot of TV. It'll become like another TV show. Like, the thing about, you got Jack Reacher, Jason Bourne, Jack Ryan, and those are all very real world based. Like, Bond is very much steeped in fantasy a bit more than those. But there's also something to be said about, and especially in this age where you have these shared universes and everything's to be continued. I remember watching Spectre for the first time, and despite my misgivings with it, when Bond is in the boat chasing him in the helicopter, I'm like, please don't do to be continued. Just get them. It's like, give me a nice ending without having to say, sorry, you got to come back in another 3 years for part 2 or something. And it's like, yeah, I like a good series every once in a while, but that's not something I could find the time to sit down and binge. Like, I like being able to watch an entire thing from beginning to end in one sitting every once in a while. And the way the Bond films remain, it kind of stay topical. Like, usually the plots of each movie reflect something going on, in society or whatnot, which I think is how they're able to, and that's how they're able to bounce back from bad movies that they do, is because they still find a way to be topical and reinvent themselves. But if it's just a series, it's like, I don't doubt the series might be good, but it's just going to be another series. Like when they said they wanted to do a Moneypenny show, it's like the whole point of Moneypenny, the running joke between the two of them is that they've never been on a date, they've never slept together. It's just them being cheeky and fun. It's like, what's the show to mind? It's like you could write any show and they're just going to slap the Moneypenny name on there, but it doesn't really.
And we saw what happened when Moneypenny was a field agent in Skyfall. I mean, and the thing about what you're bringing up at the end of Spectre, I mean, we're supposed to believe that a boat and a helicopter, you've got somebody firing a gun, a Walther PPK from a boat, like the helicopter could just go higher,
right?
And it was. I'm watching this film, and that had one of the most boring car chases in the history of cinema, where there's no other car on the road. We're late at night, and you're watching this, and it hey, it's beautifully shot and all that, but it was just, I mean, I think the problem with the Bond franchise as a whole, since it was made, that the control over it by Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli has been both a good thing and a bad thing. The production team, the people they have making the movies are great, but it's the scripts and it's the directors who either are hamstrung, and the screenplays are, they need, if they're going to make a Bond film for the modern age, we live in a very, very different world.
Right.
There's James Bond. The people that are dangerous now are people that want to die. It used to be that Bond villains wanted to, hey, we're going to kill everyone else so we can build the world anew. Hugo Drax, Karl Stromberg, even in the 70s Bond films, we're going to have Moscow and New York. We're going to start a nuclear war so that our undersea Aryan race can come back and repopulate the world. Nowadays, the entire Western civilization is fighting a group of people that just want to die. But, so how do you have a villain? How do you have a set of villains? Where do you come up with a villain that's credible in the modern age?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up that James Bond in Goldfinger says he doesn't like listening to the Beatles without earmuffs. But you're talking about now, if what you're referring to, which I think you are, is the decadence of Western society becomes the enemy, and who is more decadent and willing to die for it than James Bond? I think that is an interesting thing. It's like there's no respect from the villain for James Bond because he is a man who drinks and womanizes and enjoys a bikini and like drives fast and listens to me. Maybe that's an update in the music. I don't know. I don't need to see him dancing unless it's a tango. Let's get a little True Lies action going. But there is.
Or never say never again.
Or never say never again. Absolutely. Oh, man. I keep forgetting about that one. Although, would it Barbara Carrera?
Yeah. But I think he was dancing with Kim
Basinger.
Kim Basinger. Yeah.
But I think that would be an interesting way to attack it. I more lean towards, in terms of this business proposition, as being more of, I think, I'm with you, Rob, in terms of it being a cinematic experience. It's an event. It's something that happens every 2, 3, 4 years. At least we get, as an audience, we find out that something is coming out. But I don't want to see a weekly show and I don't want television. I'm fine with the merchandising if that's where you want to make your money. But Amazon is a physical media distributor. Whether it's not in DVDs and Blu-rays and Steelbooks and 4Ks, but stuff like what Hot Toys is doing. That's where they really, because even in the 60s with the Corgi toys, and you would get all of this merchandising that would surround the release because of the buzz of what was coming out.
And
I
kids,
think there is a business machine to be pursued.
Well, I mean, it's like right now I'm building the Agora models, Lotus Esprit, the submarine Lotus Esprit that lights up and it has motorized things, and there's still cool Bond stuff to be had, but in terms of, it has no pop culture footprint in terms of young people.
Well, but then my only counter is Top Gun Maverick. Like 16-year-olds couldn't have given a crap about Top Gun, but because of the way that it was made, which brings it back to the way that James Bond movies were made, even going up until Casino Royale, where you had that parkour sequence and actual stunts. Bring it back to that, which is something that Tom Cruise brought. And I know everybody says he reinvented stunts and saved the movie industry or whatever, but like make it a little bit more practical and make it something that is an event.
To that point, and to Rob's point earlier, Rob, do you think that with this move, there's an opportunity for our tourist filmmakers to get into the Bond?
Well, I think here's the problem with all. We live in a world where corporations have bought these IPs, and they've bought these IPs on the backs of creatives that made something that has endured throughout the years. The problem is corporations don't know how to make movies. They don't know what makes one good story better than another. And so now you have these corporate overlords who are making their decisions based on not gut instinct, but by analytics or whatever. And at the end of the day, they don't know what makes a good movie or a bad movie.
Right.
I mean, they have no idea. They have no clue.
And remember, Amazon tried to do their own version of their own franchise, the Citadel thing, some years ago, where they spent $300 million on it. They planned all these spin-offs. Everything was going to work. And it failed because, like you always say, never put your universe in front of your characters. No. And that's exactly what they did, and it failed.
You need like, if you look at, I always go back to Creed, the movie Creed. You have a filmmaker who he made Fruitvale Station, and a great independent movie, and he loved the Rocky franchise. And his mother was dying. The story I've heard is his father and him watched Rocky movies to make themselves feel better. And he came up with this idea of Creed and had to go pitch it to Sylvester Stallone, the man who owned the franchise. And to me, I would say that what he did was an amazing thing. He went to the person who created this franchise and said, I have an idea to make a spinoff. And he pitched it to, and Stallone's like, okay, I buy into this, and I'm a secondary character in my own movie. And I don't think Creed's perfect. Cut to Sylvester Stallone gets an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor, playing his own character in a spinoff from his own series, because you had a director who had a vision.
Yeah, and the love absolutely came through in the picture.
Right,
100%.
The person who made it loved that franchise.
Yeah, and you can see it, and it's not. I mean, it's not necessarily, like the greatest movie in the world, and I've heard people that have problems with it. But you see the love, like you said, you see the love in that film, and the reason I'd like to believe that the reason Ryan Coogler, the writer-director of Creed, was hired to then move on to Black Panther was Creed showed how does a filmmaker understand how to work in a universe that they didn't even create, that they were able to come in and write something brand new that took a franchise that was moribund or at least finished. I mean, there had been 6 Rocky movies, and he comes in and reinvents the whole thing, which led to a trilogy of movies. What you need, I'm not saying Bond is dead, but Amazon, look, they don't even want to make theatrically released films.
That's the thing.
And
it's like, what you need is a filmmaker like Christopher Nolan's made his 2 Bond movies, Inception and Tenet. I mean, obviously, half of Inception is on Her Majesty's Secret Service, but if you have a filmmaker that can go in. Now, Amazon, I'm sure, is going to look for people, but I have no faith necessarily. They've spent way too much money to get the Bond franchise. I mean, they already acquired MGM, so they had the distribution rights. but they paid them $1 billion. That's more than they paid for the rights for Rings of Power.
Yeah.
And it's like now they're going to have to make good on that. What they need to do is they need to find passionate filmmakers that are going to come in and make great movies. And the thing is, I don't think they know the difference.
That's why I was so upset at this news, because it's like, okay, you're buying content. Like again, going back to the Wall Street Journal article, Barbara's upset that they used the word content and the way they were describing it is just something else to keep people from canceling their subscriptions. They don't recognize that if you start diluting the brand, it's going to lose that unique flavor and the specialness that you only get it ideally every 2 or 3 years, sometimes maybe 4. Because I mean, the delays obviously with No Time to Die were more pandemic related, so that wasn't really.
Yeah, and also the script. I mean, clearly that movie is a cobbled together film where they're like, let's remake Dr. No, kind of, sort of, maybe, Shatterhand, maybe.
It's little bit. Yeah, it was their attempt at doing what You Only Live Twice didn't give us, which is the end of the story. Because we know that Fleming wanted to stop writing the books at that point. That's why you have that awkward 4th act in the end after he kills Blofeld, where he's like living as a farmer with this lady, and we find out that she's pregnant, but she doesn't want to tell him because she doesn't want a shotgun wedding. And he was going to submit it as that was going to be the end of the story. He was going to marry her, and his publisher got in his ear. It's like, what, you crazy? We're not killing this cash cow now. Yeah. And that's why you changed it. So it's like, okay, they took that in mind. And so they tried to make it No Time to Die. Like, the pre-title sequence is homaging, obviously, Majesties and the end of that. And the rest of the movie is kind of giving you a better story-wise adaptation of You Only Live Twice than the movie Namesake from 1967. And because the Craig era is its own thing, I didn't really mind it. I actually really enjoyed that movie because it's like, cool, we're kind of seeing, like, say 100 years from now, if they're still making Bond movies, if some kid asks, well, how did Bond end? Did he retire? Well, no, this is what happened. Or how did Bond get his start? Point to Casino Royale. Regardless of what the geopolitical situation
is.
I
mean, what's interesting is if you watch, if you go and take the Bond movies as its own continuity, you start with Casino Royale as the first James Bond movie.
Right.
And there's that chronological order.
Yeah, but and I agree that was a mess, because it's almost like, because I believe a rising tide raises all ships. Just because Spectre wasn't good doesn't mean you can't bring in a better writer-director who can elevate the Blofeld character. Like, even Christoph Waltz threw shade at his role in Spectre, saying, yeah, they didn't really give me anything to do. Well, they could have elevated him and made him a gangbusters villain in the last movie, but instead they just threw him under the bus because it felt like they were listening to some, marketing team which said, oh, if it didn't work in the movie of its namesake, it's not going to work now.
Well, they were chasing the idea of that cinematic universe. They tried to retcon the entire Daniel Craig era into this one long epic saga, which was silly, because you start, when you get to Skyfall and you've got M saying, well, it's okay to have missed a step. It's like, wait a minute, dude. We never saw in the Daniel Craig era him getting a mission.
Yeah. Right.
He never walked in the door with M, who M said, listen, man, we got this problem. You got to go solve this. It was always some angst-ridden BS kind of a thing. I mean, James Bond loves being James Bond. He loves it. He's not woe is me. And he loved being James Bond, made you feel it, didn't he? Bang. And that's and the opening of Casino Royale tells you everything you need to know about Bond. He sees this unbelievably buxom, beautiful woman and a guy with a DB5. He's like, I want both of those things, and I'm going to go take them. And he's unapologetic in that. And I mean, he's sorry that woman wound up dead, but she was a great piece of ass. It's not like he thought, wow, I'm going to fall in love with her. I mean, that woman was incredible, and I'm sure Bond feels like he feels about Caviar. Women are art to him. He loves women, and you might think he's misogynistic, but it's like women aren't better than he is, and he's willing to sacrifice anyone because he has to get the job done for the Queen.
Right.
And that we don't even love nationalism anymore. We don't even believe in our own countries. And James Bond is a man that will die for England. And unless we live in a world, Americans don't know what it means to love your country. Canadians certainly hate Americans. Now.
Well, not me.
I would.
I don't.
Why aren't you watching tonight's hockey game? It's one of the biggest things.
Because I'm a terrible Canadian. I'm sitting here talking about British secret agents with an American.
I don't know. I
understand where you're coming from in terms of the romantic nature of James Bond, but also in The Living Daylights, he starts by bitching out Saunders by saying, stuff my orders. When Roger Moore was talking about the nature of his license to kill, he always wanted to imbue a sense that he hated the killing part, but he knew it was his job and that's what he had to do. I think that there are aspects that can sort of they're malleable to a certain extent, and they are heightened or diminished with whoever is playing them. Absolutely. Daniel Craig was the
By the way,
James Dean.
U.S. and Canada are tied. End of regulation play.
You going down, sucker? Is it going to be a shootout? It better not be a shootout.
I don't know. I don't know. All I can do is report to you what happened minutes ago.
I appreciate it. But I'm just saying, like, he was the emo, he was the angsty James Bond, and maybe he was the one that the early aughts and the 2010s needed. And now, maybe it is a situation where we get something like, as you mentioned, a Spectre show, and then we don't get a James Bond until it is a theatrical. Have they? Like because this news came out at like 1:00 this afternoon, have they confirmed that they have no interest in venturing into cinema?
No, they haven't. But the thing is that the paradigm. Look, the James Bond series ending its theatrical run is just we're moving into a different era of life. I mean. And the thing is that the James Bond franchise does not mean to culture what it meant in 1962. And the Bond franchise has been eclipsed by what Tom Cruise has done since Ghost Protocol with the Mission Impossible movies.
Sure.
And while they've been successful, certainly, to make Bond an emo character, I think was a mistake.
Yeah,
and it was a mistake in Skyfall. And I think it might have worked. I mean, people that movie made $1 billion, and people love it because the villain was the Joker, and they're coming off of The Dark Knight, and so they get that. But if you look at that film from a Bond perspective, there's so many distasteful things in Skyfall, like the one of the most beautiful women who's ever been in a Bond film. When he has to shoot off, Bond allows a woman to die against a wall when they're shooting.
Yeah, and he had the loaded gun in his hand, and 2 seconds later, he just stops the guys effortlessly. It's like, why didn't you do that 2 seconds ago?
I mean, it's so. Skyfall is I think one of the greatest swindles of a franchise in cinema history, and everyone loves it, and nobody will understand what I'm saying, but it betrayed that character utterly. And
but. Sorry.
0091. Welcome.
No, I don't want to royally disagree, but you mentioned about 5 minutes ago that Bond, because of his actions, had a beautiful woman die in Casino Royale. I don't see the difference with the lady in Skyfall biting the dust, with him saying, "Oh, it's a perfectly good waste of scotch." It's the tone is still the same. It's just the execution.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. Skyfall. I'm talking about letting that woman die the way. Look, there many women die in Goldfinger.
Yeah.
He throws a woman in, but she's not going to die. She takes a blow for him. But to let a woman who, by the way, already said she was abused since she was a girl.
Yeah.
The way they set that character up, and to watch how she was murdered in that movie is
used and murdered
is really distasteful.
Yeah.
And that is something that the Bond franchise would never have allowed before. Now I understand why they went in.
Did the same thing in The Man with that movie, because Skyfall I mentioned is like a low-key remake of The Man with the Golden Gun, in which the same thing happens, where the villain's girlfriend's like a abused woman. She's asking for Bond's help, tricks him into coming into helping her. And then they just have her unceremoniously get shot off camera at the boxing match or whatever.
But she's not even on cam. I mean, it's
True.
Yes, it's off camera, but yeah, it's not good.
But again, it is something where the path of destruction, he goes through everything. But there are times when it is less seemly than other times. It does become a little like you're not being a nice man. But then again, one of the things that was a defining moment in early James Bond, and something that my boy Timothy Dalton tried to bring back, is that James Bond is not a nice man. He does enjoy the nicer things because he knows that his day may be his last. But if it means that he's going to be cutting through human flesh to get to what he wants, so be it.
But ironically, Living Daylights, he treats a woman so nicely because she's a woman of the arts. She's a cellist, in an orchestra, and he.
I guess it can come down to the era of which Bond we're talking about, because he may have the spirit of the character, but in the world that he's operating in, and with the Craig era, we were pretty much entering a darker, more visceral type of spy world, especially when you recall the events of the Bourne series.
Well, that's what I mean. They had to respond to that. Yeah. And if you look at Quantum of Solace of Solace is a movie that was edited. They looked at the Bourne movies, and they told the thing about Quantum of Solace is it's almost incomprehensible in its action scenes.
They also only had 6 weeks to edit that movie because they're on a major time crunch.
Yeah, I mean, it was a film because I think the writers' strike too. They had to deal with.
I think that's where a lot of the problems with the Craig era started, because Barbara says that they wanted to do standalone movies, but because of the writer's strike and because they wanted to pull the trigger on a script they didn't have, and because of the rules, it ended up being changed into what it became.
I just have to jump for. There's a dog pawing at my. I have to go make sure.
Sure.
I was gonna go.
I'll be right back.
All right, we'll both be back. We're gonna go and fight dogs.
By the time Skyfall came along, it's like, oh, we have an opportunity now where we can make this a 50th anniversary film. And yeah, there's a lot of cyber attacks and cyber stuff in Skyfall, but they wanted to make the story feel like it was something that could have feasibly happened in 1962, which, you can imagine that stripping away some of the sightings on that. But that's why that movie ends with him getting a mission from M, presumably getting the mission, because it's like, okay, this protracted origin story is over with. Now we're going to do, regular Bond movies, but that's when they panicked and decided, oh, well, the Avengers is really successful and they're now going to do another Avengers, so let's make a shared universe.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like I'm just surprised at hearing some of the unpopular reactions to some of the events that happened in the Craig era, especially with Skyfall. Because I remember watching Skyfall multiple times in the theater and I had a great time all the way through. Yeah, thinking back on it, a lot of stuff happens very specific in the script, and like everything is timed so perfectly to the minute that you think it's impossible for everything to be so timed so perfectly. But the momentum was there when I saw it, so I never really had much of an issue with it. And then the whole thing, like I was mentioning earlier, when Rob was talking about letting the woman die the way she did, getting shot by Silva, I'm just like, oh, that's just the price you pay for being around James Bond. I think for that series, for that story, for Daniel Craig, and the point that everybody was trying to make, that wherever you go, death follows you and there's no redemption for you. But
I don't think the issue so much is that she died. It's that the fact that 1 second later, after he says it's a waste of good scotch, he still had the loaded gun in his hand and he effortlessly takes out all the guys. So it's like, why didn't you just do that a second earlier and save her? You knew what Silva was about to do, and I think that's kind of more because women have died a lot in Bond movies. Usually it used to be that there'd be two like Bond girls. The first one would die in like around the start of the second act, and then the next one would and then the next one would be the main all the way through. But I do agree that Bond is somebody who also is a darker character at times. Like, that's a Smith & Wesson, and you've had your 6. That's like one of my favorite scenes because he's just so ruthless about it, and he's not remorse. Nope, I don't care. I'm not even going to interrogate you. I've already tried that. You're done. And it's like, I kind of like that ruthlessness to some extent to the character.
I just guess maybe it's just when some of them die, it's for shock value, and then the other times where we have, like, say, Gemma's character in Quantum of Solace, it was a recreation of the girl that died in gold, but in this case she was drowned in oil. They went for the shock value there, but it worked. Here it's just a matter of, really, did she have to go that way? I guess I guess I'm disconnected as to what the issue is. I never had an issue with her dying. The only issue I did have when you combine it together is that she just poured your heart out to how much she was abused. Then the next scene, you pump her for information, as M would say, and the next scene, okay, you're going to discard her away. That I agree. In the sequence of those events, that was not exactly a ceremonious way for that character to go.
Well, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is that when you put all those three together, yes, it's not it's not a tasteful way. But if I'm just focused on that one scene when she's tied up for the whole point of, oh, that's a perfectly waste of scotch, then well, that's Bond. That's typical Bond right there. It's not pretty.
Well, but the thing is, they turned Daniel Craig into a different kind of a man, you know, and you see him from Casino Royale when he loses Vesper, and look, it's one thing if Roger Moore or Timothy Dalton or Pierce Brosnan do it, but the way that they were positioning Bond, especially after Quantum and Casino, when you get to Skyfall, that Bond that they've established in 2 previous movies, for him to act that way was out of character, the character that they had established in the previous films. And it's like you either want to delve into Bond's emotional baggage and you want to go that way. Look, I didn't believe anything that happened in Skyfall. When Moneypenny shot him off the train in the beginning, and Bond's like, "Oh, woe is me. I'm going to play drinking games with the Scorpion on a beach somewhere." I'm like, he knew what happens in the field happens in the field. He didn't die. Moneypenny took the shot. She's not a crack shot. She's not a sniper. He would have known. And it's like, do you think he would forego his mission? I watched that movie from the very beginning. I'm like, this is bullshit. Bond would never like, oh, woe is me. And then when he goes back home sheepishly after MI6 is attacked, none of that made any sense to me. I'm like, what? This character would not do that. He would know. Life's tough, man. Moneypenny missed, shot me off the train. I didn't die.
Well,
I'm gonna get back home.
Not only that, but one of the things that bothers me about the Craig movies is that at the end of every movie that Daniel Craig was in, he says, "All right, I'm ready to get to work." And I was like, okay, next time. And then the next movie comes and he's like rogue again. And then at the end of the movie, it's like, "Are you ready to come back?" "I was never gone." And then at the end of the next movie, he walks in and he goes through that mahogany double door and he sees Ralph Fiennes as M. And it's like, "All right, sir, I'm ready to get to work." And the next movie, it's like, okay, he does 20 minutes of a mission. And then he's like, "I'm done." And then it's like the whole thing is just perpetually of him saying, and like by the third movie, he's like, "I'm retired. I'm retired now," or "I missed a step."
Well, that's the thing that it didn't like. The funny thing about Casino Royale was he was on a mission when that movie opens, and it like goes pear-shaped or whatever, and he's on the news. He's a newly minted agent or whatever. But I mean, that movie is. It's funny. I'll admit to you guys, I didn't love Casino Royale when I first saw it. I like all these because there are things about it. But watching it again over and over and over again, I think it's one of the great Bond films. I mean, I really do. And there's so much in it that I love. And it's amazing to me then when you go into Quantum of Solace, it's kind of a postscript to and my only thing, I love everything about Quantum except the way it's edited. The opening credit sequence, which I think is fucking terrible because Mark Forrester brought his own people in to do that opening credit sequence. Why do you have Daniel Kleinman? Why do you not use him? And the climax at the hotel is kind of ridiculous. But the rest of that movie has a lot of really cool stuff in it. I mean, except the way it's edited makes it interminable to watch.
Well, to your earlier point about what kind of villains would you have in a Bond film, and like, well, that whole storyline for Quantum was inspired by the actual Bolivian water wars between 1997 and 2005.
Yeah, which I loved all that.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's like, and to your point about what would a Bond villain today look like, it's like, well, there's all sorts of stuff like that going on in the world. And it's funny because in Quantum, they had to justify in the script, why is Bond, or by extension, MI6 and, England getting involved in a little coup thing down here? Like, why should they care? And it's because he's following the breadcrumb trail from Casino. So that justifies, because, as much as we love Bond, I had to agree with M's boss when he's like, Okay, so what does this have to do with England's national security? But it makes sense for the story. And like Casino Royale, it was topical because you had a financier for terrorism. And that was after you had things like the 9/11 Commission report came out, which found that people like that were facilitating the funds for the 9/11 people. So it's like that was topical. So I think there's plenty of things going on in the world today where you could tell, like, no shortage of Bond villains in terms of that type of stuff that's going on to keep it topical. I don't think there's a shortage of that.
Well, the only thing, I think you're right there. I think it really is just a question of, again, it comes down to writing and story.
Right.
And the thing is, the Craig era was making the stakes personal and making, Bond vulnerable and all that. Look, the interplay between Vesper and, like, on the train, your perfectly formed ass, you noticed. I mean, all that stuff, all that is great. I mean, all that's great because she was formidable. And there's some great pathos, like when she gets that after the scene in the hallway when they're in the shower together, and she's like, she's an accountant basically, and she's having to deal with everything that happened to her. I mean, I think that Casino Royale is the perfect modernization of Bond. Mm-hmm. And then Quantum follows it up. There's a lot of missteps in the fact that they edited the film the way they did, but there's the Tosca sequence, and the whole thing about Quantum was really interesting when they met in the opera. That whole idea was really, really, I thought, really, really cool. There's a lot in that movie and I really loved Olga Kurylenko. I mean, she was a great Bond girl. They didn't sleep together. She was powerful and strong. It's just the end becomes so sort of I'm like, action, yeah. There's a hotel in the highest point in Chile. Let's go shoot it there in the desert. I mean, I get that, but like it seemed so kind of silly. But the idea, like you said, was really good.
But even I agree with you that I also like the story because the edit is a thing that upsets me about that too. But I do like the story. And the thing I noticed that sets the first two apart also is that visually they look like they're set in the real world. Like you go to places and there's civilians everywhere. There's tourists everywhere. Whereas Skyfall and Spectre were what I call postcard movies. Like you go to a little tourist stand and you have a postcard and it's like a picture perfect image. Like the whole car chase in Spectre. It's like, why is there nobody else out on the streets? Well, because they cleared them all out because they want it to look gorgeous, but it doesn't seem like real because like, well, where's all the people? Like, where's the bustling life? Like movies like Spy Who Loved Me.
Where's the guy who does the double take who's drinking and goes, what?
Oh, right. Like, or like in the Spy Who Loved Me where Bond and Anya go to the marketplace and they're walking through town and it's like, that's part of the appeal of going overseas with these movies. You get to see real places. And then No Time to Die is a little bit of that, not really, because they shot a lot of that like on sound stages and stuff. But that was something else that set it apart. So it feels like it's in the real world. Now, I love Roger Deakins' cinematography for Skyfall. I have no gripes about that. No,
it's the most beautiful. The film is it looks incredible.
Oh yeah, it looks better than any of the other Bond films, no doubt. But it's like one feels real and the other feels like a bit too,
Also, look, even the set pieces, like, how does everyone knows, like, Silva's being brought to England and suddenly he activates his entire team of evil Avengers that are able to, like, redirect subway cars and stuff? Like, how does anyone know? Like, those are fine, but I didn't believe any of that. And it's the kind of thing where, like, why wouldn't you
fantasy with? That's like where they start throwing in fantasy elements because they're trying to make it like, like you said, the Dark Knight.
Yeah, and look, Silva could have been a great villain, and if you kept it grounded, I mean, I understand they had to do all these things, but Bond was. I mean, it's interesting because that movie shot so realistically. It's such a beautifully made movie, and yet then they have these set pieces that you just don't believe, and then they create this Bond backstory when him and Blofeld are like brothers or what?
Yeah, it's just the Austin Powers twist, and they put it into canon.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, and yet it was totally gorgeous. But why didn't you just take M and drop her off in an SAS base or take her to some underground place where no one could get to her? Why would you take her into this incredibly vulnerable place out in the Scottish Highlands or wherever? It's such a weird choice that I don't believe.
Well, that's like getting back to the topic of like what do we think Amazon's going to do with it in terms of are they going to respect the fact that it's fantasy, or are they going to push it more in the Jack Ryan direction?
Oh, they're going to do the same thing they've been doing, Rings of Power, and run it to the ground. narratively and visually.
Or they could get a Jonah Nolan.
Well, that's what. Look, I think that they just spent $1 billion. Of course, I thought they would have done more. It all comes down to the creative team, and what they need to find is somebody who wants to make James Bond their life's ambition. We have watched the corporatization of all of our favorite IPs. And the corporations, once they own these IPs, are like, we have to find people. And what they do, they use analytics, or they're like, this person did this. So we have to get this person because their box office made this. That doesn't mean you're going to get somebody that loves the franchise.
Right.
You need to find both.
You guys might be able to help in terms of, like, when was No Time to Die? Was that Purvis and Wade?
Originally, I think it was, and then they switched to Carrie Fugalia.
By the way, I ran into those guys at a bar I used to frequent in LA.
That would be so rad.
It was so funny because it was a place. It was kind of like my Cheers, and it was called Lola's. And I met Purvis and Wade. I want to say maybe it was after No Time to Die. I mean, Tomorrow Never Dies, and they couldn't believe that some bloke in America knew who they were.
Oh,
and we're all like hanging out. We're just like talking. We work in. They were the most humble guys in the world, and the fact that they were together in town, I was like, oh my God! I don't even know if they'd remember it, but that was hilarious meeting them. And they were bouncing off the walls. They were the nicest guys in the world. And I'll tell you something. I don't know what happened. Neil Purvis and Robert Wade and David Arnold.
All right.
The David Arnold who did the Shaken Not Stirred, the Bond techno project that had the propeller heads and all these people doing Bond covers. I mean, you had people. I don't know why. I mean, when they hired Sam Mendes to direct Skyfall, they had to let. I understand why David Arnold, he wasn't Sam Mendes's guy, and then you got another great composer, but it wasn't Sam Mendes's guy, so we lost David Arnold. But David Arnold loved James Bond,
right?
Loved Bond, and he did a great score for Casino Royale.
Well, and maybe we'll be able to see something. Like I'm the optimist. As long as there is a cinematic future. Like I've made a joke for such a long time that there is one certainty in my life, and that is that I will never see the last James Bond movie. And today is the day where I'm like, wait a second, maybe I have. And that's what I'm most fearful of with this sort of reorganization of the franchise, is if it's not cinematic and if it isn't an event, and if it's the dilution of the brand, that's when I'm like, as soon as they announce a television show, that's when I'm going to be like, okay, guys, you screwed it up. The other truism about James Bond that I've heard from people older than me is the day you stop caring about James Bond is the day that James Bond is younger than you. And so I'm worried about both of these things. I want to care about James Bond, even though more than likely, like I'm 47, so they're probably not going to get a 47-year-old James Bond. But also, am I going to see James Bond in the theater? These are the two things. One is inevitable, and the other one, as you guys are saying, it's a corporate decision as to whether or not Amazon wants to retain subscribers or if they want to live up to the philosophy and the feeling and the nature of what James Bond is, which is a cinematic event.
Since they do own MGM, if they still put it under the MGM banner, then they'll probably still get theatrical releases and even home media releases, because MGM still does that. Whereas if it was purely Amazon, you'd never see a home media release. It would just go straight to Prime Video.
Well, that was the one thing about this day that really depressed me, is we're not going to get 4Ks of the Bond catalog.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Global James Bond Day in 2022 came by for the 60th anniversary, I was convinced they were going to announce
me too
4K box set, and I was shocked. And because of the 8-hour time change, all their celebrations were over. I had 8 hours left, and so I did something you're going to hate me for doing, Rob. I bought the first 20 movies as a digital 4K set. And because
I don't hate you for that, because that's all you can get. And if you theoretically, if you download the files,
right,
and you're not watching them streaming, they should be pretty incredible.
And not only, and I can't believe it, but those 4Ks, particularly of the Sean Connery films, blow my Blu-rays from the Bond 50 set out of the water.
Yeah,
They are
of course,
gorgeous.
The
vibrancy and the colors. It is amazing job that they did on it. I'm like, how have you not? And these have existed since around 2015 or so when they started doing this. I'm like, how have you not put this out of physical media in the last?
Oh no, it's and if you go to like if you do the Kaleidoscape route and start downloading these uncompressed movies and all that. I mean, look, I never thought I would. We're living through the end of cinema. You know, as an art form. And look, frankly, I think people would say I'm insane for saying this, but I do think what Amazon should be looking at in terms of the James Bond franchise is all of this two-dimensionality of what they need to start doing is James Bond should be the first franchise that ushers us into the new virtual reality age of cinema. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I have no idea. But what I'm talking about is a fully immersive. Imagine an experience where you're watching a Bond film. Yes, using virtual reality glasses or whatever. I'm not talking about being in a cinema. But where you're actually sitting in the environments where each scene takes place in. You know, where you're watching like and you can turn and look around you and I don't even know how to do this. I don't know. But that's what we're moving into. And I don't think people have really grasped, because it's hard for people to understand what's going to be possible in the near future. And as much as, look, I mean, I have thousands of movies that I have on physical media, but even I can recognize, and I've said this, it's the great art form of the 20th century. But technology has moved beyond that. And we're going to be in an era where people are going to create entertainments that are very different than the passive watching movies in cinemas that we've become so used to, which I dearly love. I don't want them to go away. But we're on the cusp of technology that is going to blow all of that out of the water. And again, I don't even know how to wrap my head around what we're going to get, but it's going to be pretty amazing. And I'm just wondering if maybe James Bond could be the perfect person or perfect character to lead us into a bold new age. Because remember, the James Bond franchise, the thing that we love, started in 1962. I have an original Dr. No, beautiful, mounted on linen, museum quality framed in my movie room.
Right, you do.
Of that poster. And I look at that every day. I was looking at it today. I stood next to it. I stood looking at it today, lamenting this thing that I've had my entire life. I'm 57, man. And it's like, what's next? And I don't know.
That's another thing that's really depressing about this, because it's unprecedented for a film franchise to be family run for 63 years. I mean, that is so insane that it is kind of sad that they finally kind of gave up. And again, I still think that the reason why I'm not optimistic about it is that if they just genuinely wanted to retire and move on, then they would have given it to Greg. And if they still wanted to retire and move on, they would have given it to Amazon right after the acquisition happened. But the fact that it happens now, coming off the heels of that Wall Street Journal article, and I think that had a lot to do with it, because I heard that if there's a stalemate, either side could force the other to start doing something potentially. Like there's some legal instruments that one side can make saying, hey, we need to get this going, and maybe that kind of forced the issue.
But but isn't it, I mean, I think now is the time to go, you know what? We got 25 official Bond films over 63 years. Like you said, unprecedented. All eras must end. Mm-hmm. And as much as I love James Bond, we have 25 official Bond films. We've got Never Say Never Again. We've got even Never Too Young to Die, where George Lazenby unofficially played Bond. You know, you've got Woody Allen's Casino Royale. There's such a great legacy.
The Jimmy Bond Casino Royale.
You know, you're starting to sound like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. It's time for the Jedi.
Well, no, but I mean, I think that the problem is that James Bond was a character that came out of a very specific point in time.
Yeah.
You know, like Em said, you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a product of the Cold War.
And that was a moment of rebirth for James Bond.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, they reinvented the character, and that's one of the strengths of the franchise. It's always able to
30 years ago.
Him. They had the world acknowledge him. And now that we've gone on this emotional journey with Daniel Craig's James Bond, I think that the world, I think it's open. And especially because this is so fresh, I don't think that it's completely off the table that Greg Wilson is absolutely off the table. Like, there are still possibilities, as Spock once said. I think
people don't even want to get laid anymore.
Sorry?
Young people don't want to get laid anymore. You look at the statistics, kids aren't even having sex.
You're talking about a brave new world that James Bond can usher in? Let's make sex good again because of James Bond.
No, it's oppressive.
Let's see some bikinis and naked ladies.
That's the male gaze.
But that was the biggest thing. And again, the last time that I recall someone going, James Bond is dead, is when Daniel Craig showed up and he was wearing a life jacket and he was blonde, and everyone said, well, that's not James Bond. And it wasn't until Daniel Craig as James Bond recreating Ursula Andress walking out of the ocean and being cut short, but cut. And everyone was like, okay, he can be Bond. And that was not just the male gaze, but the female gaze being like, oh, James Bond isn't just like, James Bond can be somewhat jacked. And everyone sort of...
but even that...
they were okay with it.
Both gazes have been diminished in our society.
Well, let's bring it back. It's not over forever. I heard an interesting phrase, is that as generations go, this is from Craig Ferguson's latest stand-up special. He said, the last generation was all about drinking and doing drugs and having sex, and they were promiscuous and whatever. And now everyone's saying, oh, you got to watch your drink. You don't want to get into too many sexy situations. And the thing is, they're going to be puritanical about this. And you know what their kids are going to do? They're going to make the last generation look like it's going to make Caligula look like Nerf.
I don't think that's a good thing, though.
Well, I'm just saying it is cyclical. It's a pendulum swinging.
I mean, look, it all comes down to the individual, you know, and
as I hope.
And all civilizations. I mean, I believe that what the West is good at, starting with things like habeas corpus, Western civilization making the individual responsible and offering an opportunity for every individual to do whatever that individual wants to do is the greatest thing that Western civilization ever did. The idea of the sovereignty of the individual, personal rights, all of those things, you know, is a great thing. And as we're watching the modern age, you've got young people that want to believe in collectivism. You know, they because being able to have a dream and achieve it is a hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. We don't even have young people anymore that dream. Some do. You know, the greatest thing about the United States across the world, the one thing that the Americans have that nobody else has this. Americans are like, fuck yeah, man. I want to do this. It doesn't matter what crazy cockamamie scheme it is. I want to build a thing, or I want to create this. Or Americans would be like, fuck yeah, dude, let's do that. I'll help you. And that's what Americans had. And that was because we had everybody from all around the world pouring into this country. We had pluralism. We had ideas from everywhere. And where you go to France, no, you don't want to do that. Let's have some more cheese, drink some more coffee. You don't why spend the time and do that? Americans, we're crazy.
Yeah.
And
I believe in what you're saying, and I don't. But again, to bring it back to the James Bond and to bring it to what we are currently experiencing in entertainment with major corporations, like they're buying it, they're going to use it as they're going to slap a sticker on a lunchbox and they're going to sell it. And all of that jazz. And
but the thing is, they don't
very
know
Jeff Goldblum, but I don't think that this is the end of the story, sir.
But
I think it will go forward, and there will be greatness achieved.
They don't. I look. I'd like to agree with you, and I think Amazon's done a lot of great stuff. But the problem with the corporate mindset is they don't know the difference between good and bad.
Right, and I don't trust Amazon to actually. Right, I don't trust Amazon to know what's good. I think good happens to them because the right creators got in the door, right, and made The Boys or made The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Awesome shows, right? I do not trust
Jack Reacher's great for what it is. It's a great adaptation of the book.
Reacher too, right? But I do not trust Amazon to say, okay, we absolutely know how to make Bond great again, right? I don't trust that yet.
But there's nobody. I mean, here's the thing. If they told me who they had bought Bond for, if Steven Spielberg said, I want to make a Bond movie, I'd love to see a Steven Spielberg Bond movie. I would love to see that. I would love to see him make a Bond film, and I would love to have Steve Zalian write it. And I think Steven Spielberg, I know he wanted to make a Bond film. I could see that actually happening. I'd love to see Martin Scorsese make a Bond film.
But this is very interesting in terms of does this just, and I know that we did get that with No Time to Die, but does this mean that we're just wide open international directors, writers? Like, does that mean that it's no longer restricted to British filmmakers?
Well, British filmmakers don't even have it anymore because even though the Broccoli's were an American family, their offices, they all lived in England, and that's where their offices were. Amazon's purely American.
And Cary Fukunaga is not British.
No, and that's what
And neither was Mark Forrester, who directed Quantum of Solace. I mean, I think they think that James Bond himself has to be a British actor.
Or Australian, or Irish,
or Scottish,
from the Commonwealth,
or Scottish.
Somebody from the UK or the Commonwealth, right? I mean, everyone talks about Henry Cavill. I love Henry Cavill. I really do. I think that you brought up the Man from U.N.C.L.E. film. That movie rules.
Yeah, it does.
And it's amazing that it there's a documentary on the Blu-ray about their style. Like how much they put into creating the style of that movie. It's so great. You look at that and like these people and Guy Ritchie, they deserved so much success and they didn't get it. And
well, to your point though, that the Man from U.N.C.L.E. nobody
knew.
Would even know what the Man from U.N.C.L.E. was. But you're just one kick-ass movie away from getting people interested to find out what.
That's what I've always said.
Yeah,
I think as much as I like Guy Ritchie, I think what The Man from U.N.C.L.E. needed is the same thing that GoldenEye got. They needed a Martin Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Guy Ritchie did that movie's really well done.
I like it as it is.
Yeah,
but to have had the success that they probably wanted it to have, a Martin Campbell was needed because that Martin Campbell formula that he brought to a GoldenEye is what The Man from U.N.C.L.E. for a new audience, a new era would have needed.
I agree, but then someone will tell you, "Well, Martin Campbell directed Green Lantern."
Yeah, I was going to say that.
He did, but
which, by the way, I think is much better than people give it credit for. I'm just saying.
It's fine. It's
fine. Prior to Green Lantern, the Martin Campbell formula was working.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. I was an advocate when everybody's saying, "Oh, who's the new Bond actor?" I was thinking, who's going to be the director? And I'm like, everything comes in threes. He brought the franchise back twice. Let's do it a third time.
Yeah. No, I think you need somebody that has a vision. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that but the thing is, Amazon spent so much money on Rings of Power, buying those rights for $450,000 and $450 million, and we get. I think Rings of Power is terrible. One of the most mediocre, horrible um, wastes of an IP ever. And the fact that it's even considered an IP. I mean, look, Peter, Fran, and Philippa, who did Lord of the Rings, it is not a direct it's an adaptation of Tolkien. It really is. And they took a lot of liberties within the framework of films. But you know what they never lost sight of? They never lost sight of what Professor Tolkien was doing. And they had a fealty to his vision. It's an adaptation, certainly. But even though things happen differently, you feel that what you're watching is Lord of the Rings.
And everything felt real and lived in.
Yeah, but I mean, you feel the story that they're telling is essentially what Tolkien wanted, and they're hitting the beats. You watch Rings of Power, and you watch something that is beyond creatively bankrupt.
Yeah,
or you watch
the first season. I think they did better in the second season, but it's still mediocre at best.
Well, yeah, but better in this. The entire conception of what they're doing is wrong-headed. They could never do it. Mordor was created by.
All right, if you guys are going to talk to Lord of the Rings, I'll be back in a second.
No,
I think that's why that Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey, who collaborated on Lord of the Rings, he went down to New Zealand for the first season of Rings of Power, and he only stayed 3 days, and he came back. And I think it's because he saw what they were doing, and it's like, guys, you don't have the rights to adapt any of this stuff. It's like, just do the appendices, which you do an anthology series based on the appendices, which you do have the rights for, but they're just trying to do their own thing and slap a name on it, and it'll make money. And it's like, it hasn't really dented the pop culture of Lord of the Rings at all.
Not at all.
And it just made everybody angry.
Because it's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, and like modern Star Trek. I mean, modern Star Trek has no pop culture footprint. None. Zero.
Yeah. And it's one thing to do your own thing. It's another thing to do it good. Because I've seen a lot of franchises where somebody comes in, they say, hey, I have this idea. It's going to rub some people the wrong way at first, but there is a point to it. And if you stick with it, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know I've seen some stuff where someone came into an already established IP. They carved their own pocket universe within it. And it's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I know there's one out there, but I know I've seen examples where something is like this almost pissed me off. But then when I was patient with it and actually accepted it for what it was, I'm like, you know what? This is the best thing that's ever happened to this franchise. And it's not Rings of Power.
I'll give you an example. When John Byrne took over writing Superman post Crisis on Infinite Earths, he went back and he did his Man of Steel miniseries and started writing Superman. And he created all different kinds of variations on a theme. And he had his pocket universe where Superman actually killed Ursa, Zod, and Non. And all this stuff that went on. It was very different, but it really worked. And I think people really liked it back. We're talking 86, 87, 88. And I know it's just comic books. But it was really, really good. And it was really enjoyable, and in the post-crisis era, people are like, okay, the DC multiverse was collapsed into one universe, and they had to deal with all this stuff. And it was, I thought, a really great example of that. And then you can see, it just comes down to, I just don't think that there's any creator alive today. And there's been a lot of great Bond comics. We've seen novels, the John Gardner books, beginning with License Renewed or License Revoked or whatever. And we've seen multiple people write Bond novels. Raymond Benson. A lot of people have written Bond books.
Percy wrote one that I picked up. I think it was Dynamite Comics. Who had
great, really good. There's been all kinds of Bond comic books. So there's certainly great creators out there who can.
Everybody wants to put their stamp on something, especially if it's something that's near and dear to them. And Bond is like like you mentioned earlier, it is the quintessential male fantasy. Bond. It's not Batman, it's not Superman, it is a guy in a perfectly formed tuxedo. That is the quintessential male fantasy.
Because he fucks.
Exactly.
Superman and Batman do not. I mean, Bond, and not only does Bond is a connoisseur. And even though they don't get into this, Bond rocks every woman's world that he sleeps with. I mean, he makes her come 4 or 5 times before he even
Yeah,
gets
because
off.
he's so stressed.
You know
with every
that.
freaking mission, he has to fuck something, otherwise he's gonna go insane.
Yeah, but he doesn't just do it. It's like Bond when he eats caviar. He doesn't just eat caviar.
He's eating it. Yeah,
He savors it. And
it's like
Bond
that
is not some
joke. Are you eating that caviar? Or are you eating that caviar?
Yeah, Bond is eating everything, if you know what I'm saying. And he knows what's up. He knows how to rock the ladies' world. And that's why they love him. He's a swarthy man. But the thing is, he's like, look, he knows. He's like, this might be the only time I ever sleep with this woman in my whole life. But he's going to leave her with the greatest,
I think
Fatima Blush.
Right? Absolutely.
The greatest.
Well, I think that's why the quintessential fantasy that it is, it was able to grow out of what those books originally were, which is Ian Fleming's really naive fantasy that England still mattered on the world stage, which it didn't at the time. Because people say, oh, Bond's kind of outdated. And it's like, well, it was outdated when the whole concept was outdated when he wrote the first book in 1953. It's like England wasn't a superpower anymore, but it was like that type of neo-imperialist English imperialist fantasy that he was writing. But to Rob's point, the thing that the casual fans connect with is the sex appeal and the how he's going to rock your world, all that quintessential male fantasy. That's what they're responding to.
Yeah.
And that's something that could remain popular and easily, and that's what keeps a lot of people coming back to the tune of,
but it all comes down to fealty to the original, conceit of what James Bond is. If the creators don't have that fealty, it's hard. As much as the internet loves to bitch and moan, it's hard to make movies. It's hard to make good TV shows.
Yeah,
it's hard to
really
make
hard.
movies. And so we understand that. But if you don't have that fealty to the core material and to the spirit of what the James Bond character and franchise is, then I don't. There's not a lot of hope there that we're going to get good stuff.
But also, I mean, our culture has changed.
It has,
irrevocably changed, and it comes down to the fact that male female roles have changed a great deal. And by the way, this isn't a bad thing. I mean, the early Bond films are incredibly misogynistic. They really are. And like when you finally get to 1977. And you have Spy Who Loved Me and Anya Masova, XXX is actually Bond's equal. And there's that great scene where M and General Gogol are watching their two agents spar in terms of knowledge. And it's not, I mean, Barbara Bach's a beautiful woman, but they're watching their agents spar in terms of what they know.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russian guy, General Gogol is not like, just because my agent's a woman makes her lesser than you. My agent's a woman and got one over on you. I mean, and the funny thing is the Bond franchise has been way more progressive than people ever give it credit for. Because in 77, to have Anya Masova being an equal to Bond, and sure, ultimately you have a man and a woman. At the end of the day, I mean, this weird thing about men and women shouldn't be together, or, oh my God, let's break apart the nuclear. It's such a weird thing because at the end of the day, that's what we're biologically through millions of years of evolution hardwired to be. And it's like the Bond franchise actually, for what it is, posited that the Russians' best agent is Anya Amasova. And Anya Amasova is head to head with Bond. When this mission is over, I will kill you. You killed my lover. I will fucking kill you. Fuck you. She says that in that movie.
Yeah.
And we don't know at the end of the film.
And they really botched that in that film.
Well, but the thing is, I mean, she understands at the end of the day.
My thing with that movie is that they spend almost an hour building on the relationship and the working relationship between Bond and Anya. And then in the climax, she's just a damsel in distress and plays no role whatsoever. I'm like, why did you spend the last hour of this movie telling us she's Bond's equal? And then just have her be, oh, help me. And
because it's a James Bond movie.
But also, team up and do.
You gotta lean in. I mean, seriously, you get
Wei Lin. You get Wei Lin later when you Tomorrow Never Dies, which is basically
they team up and go for it.
And she does come back, but also that was what, 20 years later?
Years ago.
Yeah.
97?
Oh yeah.
By the way, that movie's much better than people give it credit for.
It is.
I have
I
a
really
theory.
enjoy that one. I don't get all.
By the way,
hate
do you know? I read the novel. I
You read the novelization? Who wrote it?
I read the novelization of that book, and it was written by, I think it was written by John Gardner.
Oh, okay.
So I read it while I was driving back from Seattle. So I was literally driving down I-5
with it on your steering
with it on and reading this book as I was driving.
Sweet.
I read the entire. Don't tell anyone that.
I won't. I won't. It's secret safe.
But what's really interesting about that book is they took Stamper. The Stamper had he had a bullet in his brain, and his pain and pleasure centers were reversed, that they later used in World Is Not Enough.
Yeah.
That was all. And that book, and I'm sure they took it from the script, they clearly took elements from that script and put it in. I do like, other than Die Another Day, I think the three Pierce Brosnan Bond films, the first three, they're not great, they're not brilliant, but there's a lot to love in them.
Oh,
they're
yeah,
great,
sure.
serviceable. GoldenEye is good, Tomorrow Never Dies is good, and World Is Not Enough is good, despite the fact that Christmas came twice this year. That's some fucking cringe shit.
Well,
I love that.
Well, you got Sophie
that.
Marceau in that movie for the win, Rob.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, yeah.
But Tomorrow Never Dies, I think that movie was heavily edited down, and I think the Stamper thing there was a lot more. I mean, it was like everything in Tomorrow Never Dies is really great, but it's cut to make it so the only good news is bad news.
Oh,
I mean,
prescient.
I think that they could have made that a little bit, given it a little bit more gravitas. And having read the novelization, I'm like, the script clearly had more gravitas.
I have a theory that it is a Roger Moore movie. I think that there are, once you hit the Pierce Brosnan era, there are movies that you can see where the actor is attempting to either emulate Roger Moore, or like, I think Spectre is a Roger Moore movie as much as I think that Casino Royale is like a Connery classic Bond. And I do think that Tomorrow Never Dies is a Roger Moore movie. I do think GoldenEye is a totes.
Tomorrow Never Dies is actually a really cool film. That's really
I agree.
made.
I like it.
They also cut it to make it feel like a traditional 90s action movie.
Yes, they really did. I mean, God, they were always trying to copy shit. I hated that.
It's a good story. Topical.
Yeah,
it's topical, and it kind of goes back to the point that Bond is always, you can pluck Bond and drop him an era, and it will reflect the era of filmmaking that's happening around that time. And Kat and I discussed this the first time when we saw the news that Amazon had purchased MGM. And the first thing that came to my mind was James Bond. The hell are they going to do with James Bond? Because you don't just buy MGM for sure, you're going to get James Bond with it. And I remember telling Kat that I foresee, and this was before the article came out today about their creative rights being sold off. I thought it was a whole package. I didn't think that the creativity thing was left behind. I thought it was all a package deal. So before today, I foresee a TV show based solely on MI6. You might get some spin-offs from the other 00s that we've seen peppered here and there. I wouldn't be surprised if you get a Lashana Lynch spin-off or an
Anya Taylor-Joy.
What?
Anya Taylor-Joy.
No, not
if she wants to be a 00, I'm okay with that.
Well, everybody loved her in that movie, and she's only in it for 2
Oh,
minutes.
you mean Ana de Armas?
Oh, Ana de Armas.
Oh, Anya de Armas. That's what her name is. Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought that, Ana, like spin-offs is the one thing that I thought was probably going to happen. And then what did we get between then and now? That Brian Cox game show based on
I didn't even
on. And that was like, really? That's it? I thought we were gonna get something. Okay, maybe I freaked out.
I thought it was gonna be good.
And now that the creative rights are being taken, I'm just like, okay, it's only been 4 years since the last one. Let's calm down. What I didn't know about was how sensitive the branding and the licensing and all that stuff was on the line. If I had known that, I would have been like, oh yeah, why are you guys taking so long? But it is what it is. I think as it's been said before, because I've been listening to the different points of views, it is going to come down to who the creative team is going to be chosen to usher in the next era of James Bond. Whether it's going to be, like Scott said, an event style of films for Silver Screen, which I believe personally it should be on the big screen. Because
by the way, I totally agree with both of you, 100%.
100%.
It should be on the big screen. It should be an event, because kind of like in Skyfall, at the end of the day, you're asked James Bond's asking Q, well, then what do you need me for? Well, every now and then we need someone to pull the trigger. And I feel that every now and then we are going to need a James Bond movie to palate cleanse whatever the zeitgeist or the pop culture or wherever the big brands are taking control of the summer blockbuster or the fall blockbuster. Because when a James Bond comes in, who knows? The next James Bond movie we're going to get might be another, financially at least, another Skyfall, or we could get a combination of a movie that everybody enjoyed, like Top Gun Maverick, where multiple generations went and saw that. It is very possible. It's just going to depend on who's going to work on it, who your next Bond is going to be. And more to the point about, Rob, that you were talking about, the points of views between men and women, that younger people are not, feeling sexual anymore or sleeping and stuff like that. I think it's going to bounce back. I don't think it's the end of the world of whether people are making babies or not. Or
No, but look, I mean, again, it's cultural. It's a cultural thing, and I think, look, I joke about sex, I do, but here's the thing: we now have. When I was a kid, and I can speak to this, there was no depictions of real sex happening unless you had access to a pornographic film. And as a kid, 13 years old, I had a VCR in 1980. If you could get a videotape of pornography, that was a big thing. And like the VCR was in the middle of the family room. It's not like you could have some private time and watch porn. We now live in a world where you can just click at a keystroke, whatever age you're at, and see all kinds of, if you're a young boy or a girl and you're watching, in 10 years old, watching hardcore pornography, which they are, there is nothing in that experience that's joyful. It is alien, it is oppressive, it is dangerous, and no one wants that.
Mm-hmm.
Our normal biological desires that we used to follow. I mean, do you remember the time when the first person you ever kissed?
Yeah.
The first person that you could touch or that could touch you was the most electric, exciting thing ever.
Yep.
That's gone. That has been completely eradicated from society before you even get to that place.
All right.
Okay.
No.
No.
Come on.
No, I'm telling you.
No, but I'm just saying.
Kids today have watched all of this. They are seeing things we never saw. We never experienced.
Of course.
And everyone's trying to make sense of their own biological desires, and they're watching depictions of sexuality that is inherently oppressive and horrible.
Of course. But the thing is,
by the way, this never existed in human civilization ever before, up
like,
until the last 20, 30 years.
But think about the media that was available in the 1950s, how everything was sort of oppressive and everyone had to keep everything secret. Why do you think homosexuality was in the closet for so long? Is because people had to do it. And so life finds a way. Life finds a way.
No. You're missing something.
Please explain.
There was a natural evolution to that kind of behavior when people discovered it on their own.
Sure.
Like the first time you kissed a girl or you kissed a guy, or whether you're gay or not, that first time you kiss another man and you actually touch each other and you feel that hardness in your pants or whatever, or
Sure.
you're a woman and you have your first lesbian encounter. Mm-hmm. It was exciting. It was amazing. Yeah. Now, all of that has been supplanted because everyone's already seen it. They've already seen cinematic depictions of it. And by the way, those cinematic depictions are not what it's like. We have a fixed focal length in our view. We see it basically 50 millimeter in terms of 50 millimeter lens. When you're kissing someone, you can't even see them. It's all about your feeling, your imagination. We now, because of the internet, have already seen everything. It doesn't matter whether you're straight, gay, trans. I mean, my God, the biggest porn things are like stepmother seduces son. You know, there's all this crazy shit that we've already seen. So the first time you get a first kiss, you know what people think?
Okay.
Oh, that's disappointing.
But Rob,
what a bummer.
Going back to Bond, and we'll get back to the porn in a second. But when you
I'm talking about cultural shifts now.
No, I'm talking. I am what I know. You're not being exploitative.
Did you almost say you were wet?
No, I said I was creamy. So no, but like, for how long were there James Bond movies? And then when GoldenEye came out for the Nintendo 64, that was something that was interactive. And so now people didn't have to go to see the movies or anything like that. Video games opened up the first person shooter. But they did a bunch of stuff. Now, I'm not comparing that fantasy adventure to the real world possibility of kissing a lover. Like, that's a reality that you can watch it all the live long day on television, but it does, like, romances are a big thing. Like, you can still, when you see these things, I can watch a roller coaster. That doesn't mean I'm just going to be like, well, I know what that's like.
No. It's a whole different
But you understand the analogy that I'm sort of positing.
I do, but I would say that our civilization has shifted in now that before, you know, human sexuality up until the last, say, 25 years was a something. It was like the Matrix. You have to experience it for yourself.
Yeah, but that's the same thing now.
But it isn't now, because people have already seen all of these different things. And you know what? When you're watching, you can see anything. You can see literally anything you want. You can see whatever.
Right.
And the thing is, what that doesn't do is provide a value to the experience.
Exactly.
And so
when I played Paperboy for the first time, I wasn't satisfied until I was an actual Paperboy.
But what I'm saying is the actual experience of being with somebody, to actually hold someone in your arms.
It's still a thing I want.
Well, okay, yes, but
and
here's
kids
the thing.
do too.
But you've already been given something.
And kids like teenagers.
No. You've been given a vision of something that you're judging yourself against. That's why people are looking at things. By the way, when you were a kid, did you ever meet anyone who said they were non-binary?
Only that one load lifter.
No, you never did.
No, sorry, it was a bad Star Wars joke.
No, but I know. But here's the thing. It didn't exist. There was never anyone in the history of humanity that talked about being non-binary.
Right.
Why do
you were bi?
No, you could be bi, whatever. That's not
sure.
That's not what non-binary.
I don't know.
That's not what non-binary.
All right. I don't know. I don't know.
And I'm going to get back to Bond on this.
Please.
I promise. Now we have people that are talking about their own identities. They don't even know who and what they are in our culture.
Sure.
I would posit this is because people are now seeing things you could never see this before. Like, you could watch pornography didn't really exist in the mainstream until the last 40 years.
But okay, here's an interesting thought. When marijuana was legalized in Canada, like, you can buy it at any corner store. I'm sure your province may vary. I made an argument that the entire reason that a certain Canadian leader, fucking Trudeau, was hired is because he said to the entire country that we'll get you high. And I was like, you're just introducing an inebriate to the entire population. And a young lady that I worked with at the time said, Scott, just because it's available doesn't mean that everybody's going to do it all the time. So while I understand what you're saying about the availability of the visual depiction of human sexuality, you can see whatever you want, whenever you want. Yeah, that's true. But also some people are going to be like, why would I, when I can actually go out and do it?
Okay, here's the thing.
But they will. That is a possibility of behavior.
No, of course they will. But here's the thing. When you can't see it, to actually do it was the most amazing end-all be-all, to actually be in someone's arms, to kiss somebody.
Yeah, but instruction manuals. Bad ones, but...
Okay. Here's the thing. that was something, the only way you could do it is to actually participate in it.
But try and figure it out for yourself without seeing the IKEA instructions.
Well, that's exactly right. That's all gone because we've all now, I mean, not me, but younger people have already watched it. And the thing is, the depiction of it is
I don't think it's as overwhelming.
Yeah, you're looking, and people are like, I don't want to do that. That's horribly oppressive. So to bring it back to Bond, one of the great appeals of James Bond, especially like women wanted to find a Bond and men wanted to be a Bond.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 60s especially, you know, our sexual roles were pretty well defined for most of human history. This is not to say that there weren't LGBTQ people since the dawn of time, because there were. But most people, that's 1% of the population, call it what you want, 7, whatever. But the fact is, even people that were LGBTQ could look at the Bond franchise and understand what it meant.
Pussy galore.
Yeah, I mean, both gay women and gay men could look at whatever you want and go, I get it. I understand. I get those depictions. I understand what that meant. These are fantasy characters that are appealing to all kinds of people. I mean, and whether you want to, Pussy Galore totally coded as a lesbian, if you want to call it that. And she was, which is fine. And which makes her name ironic for men, which is even more funny if you think about it. No, she's not. Not to you, buddy.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the whole, that's the whole thing. And that what's really weird now is we are denying, and by the way, those are biologically hardwired elements that the Bond franchise gave us. And nowadays, it's not only he's a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a product of the Cold War, it's now people don't even want to fuck.
Well, but that was something in Skyfall when Silva comes up to him and says, "Is this going to be your first?" And it's all a double entendre, which
but Bond, you know what?
Fairly okay.
Bond, you know, here's what I loved about that.
Yeah,
Bond's fucked a guy. He had to in his job.
You think so?
Oh fuck yeah, he did. And you know what?
Ooh, Red Grant
probably enjoyed it.
That would be the best sex scene.
But I'm just saying, he probably enjoyed it. And you know what? He knew he had to do it. It's part of his job. It's part of his tool set.
Exactly.
And that's why when Silva comes up to him and he says that, it's and here's the thing. People are, Rob Burnett says James Bond is gay. I'm like, no, I don't think James Bond is gay. I think James Bond has a tool set and he's going to do whatever he has to do to get the fucking job done.
Yeah.
And if his mark was some gay guy, you know what? He's going to be the hottest gay dude ever. Or he'll be an insatiable bottom or a power top. It depends who he's with. And you know what? He'll fucking wait till he comes before he busts a cap in that guy's ass.
Or he's gonna shove a flaming fondue up Crispin Glover's dad's ass.
And if you want to get into it, that's the character of Bond.
Sure.
Bond does whatever needs to be done to get the job finished.
And if it feels good, all the better.
Well, Bond's a connoisseur.
Yeah. It would be, if we want to go into that rabbit hole, it would not be outside the possibility that Bond would or has explored, you know, guy on guy. Because I believe, do you remember, Rob, did you ever see The Americans on FX?
Oh, I loved it.
There was that origin story where both of them had to sleep with people of same sex in order for them to lead a mission where they had to seduce anyone at any time to get. Yeah. So that I can see in an argument that, Bond would if he needs to get the job done. But I also see the other side to that scene where it's kind of like a broy moment. I'm just like, no homo, bro.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course.
Joke like that. It's like, what makes you think it's my first time, Bubba? Joke like that before, and that's the tongue-in-cheek moment that makes Bond who he is.
No, it's true, but I would also say that there's an element of it when he completely, Silva thinks he's got one over on him.
Yeah.
And the thing is, James Bond. I think James Bond, in my mind, it's like James Bond would be able to turn any mission critical moment. If there's some sensual pleasure to be had in it, he'd find like James Bond. I don't find him to be a gay character. but I don't think that James Bond would be beyond engaging in some kind of gay behavior to kill or find out information in who, because that's just another part of his tool set.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be even sensual. It's just charm.
Yeah.
Because when you see a group of guys, there's always going to be that one guy in that one group that every guy follows because the way he carries himself, the way he talks, that's a leader, and you go with the leader. And Bond is the kind of person that he can charm his way anywhere.
Yeah, and it would be part of his job.
Yeah,
exactly.
You know, and
he's made it into an art form.
Yeah. I love that it becomes a debate, and it's like, so this man murders people for a living. Yes. Would he have sex with a man? Ooh, no, that's distasteful.
No, you would. I think he absolutely would. I mean, if you want to get into that,
he does have license to kill, so nobody would know.
He's also, I like, to your point you mentioned earlier, Rob, about Casino Royale, the girl that he has the one night stand with, and she gets killed in the hammock or whatever. That was a scene where he finds out the piece of information he wants to know, and he tells her, we got to order some more champagne, and he orders caviar, but he's like, and the guy on the phone says, do you want it for 2? And he says, no, for 1. He could, some of the older days Bond, like Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton would say, oh, I'll be there actually in an hour queue instead of 10 minutes. But Craig's Bond is like, I'm leaving her right now because the mission, I got what I needed. I got to get to the mission.
And there was a
ticking clock there too, part that he did not stay. That would be the more realistic. But the fantasy is, since I'm already here, I might as well.
Yeah.
Right, but that's the thing. He didn't do that. He just hung up. I'm on my way out the door.
Because it's the more realistic
in the next room, and it's like, nope. He's got to get whatever it takes to get the mission done. Whatever you got to give up, you're gonna do it.
100%.
But he
doesn't swallow. He doesn't swallow.
To want that sex appeal.
Sure, he does.
For it.
You think so?
Oh yeah.
I don't think he does.
Yeah, I do.
I think that James Bond fucks. I don't think he's a bottom.
He's not a bottom, but he'll swallow because he has to do the work.
Yeah, I know, but that's more like, no, you're already. Anyway, we'll talk about this later.
Check
out my OnlyFans.
Shall we do a little fan casting? I know the internet's on fire for Henry Cavill, but I've always been of the mind that when we recast, I really like Richard Madden.
Dude, I'm glad you said that. If you watch Bodyguard,
yes,
I love Richard Madden as Bond, and he's Scottish.
Yeah. No, I can see Richard Madden. Yes, definitely. It's funny. People always mention Henry Cavill, and then they released, what was it, last week? They released the test footage when he
wasn't good.
But it's funny. I can see why Craig got it and he didn't. And then when you see him in Man from U.N.C.L.E., it took him that long to perfect the secret agent that he wanted back then.
Yep.
But that was also
100%.
because he was sort of leaning on his wheelhouse in that he does, again, another pristine American accent, and especially capturing the gravitas of Napoleon Solo. I think that it was a different character and probably more to his talents.
Different, but look at how far he came from the start to then. Where if you were to take Henry Cavill from his work on Man from U.N.C.L.E. and you put him back into that casting call, the role would have been his.
You think so?
But you know what the problem with him is? He looks like a movie star.
He does.
Yeah,
he looks like a movie star.
Well, that was something that other insiders said many years ago before these tapes leaked. They said, well, Cavill, between him and Craig, it's like not only was it the acting, but they said Cavill just looks too much like Superman. That's ironically what they said. And there's no comparison. I mean, James Bond, Sean Connery was a very handsome man, but he was also a man that was believable as Bond.
Mm-hmm.
And we've now moved into a world, a post-'80s world, where people are too pretty in movies. And I think that everybody.
Pierce Brosnan was born to play Bond. I thought he was a great James Bond. Even
he was, but you know what? He's still the problem with Pierce Brosnan was he didn't have the ruthless edge because he'd already been Remington Steele and all that.
Right.
And when you see him, I posted on Twitter the actual teaser. One of my favorite movie promotional items ever is the teaser for GoldenEye. Mm-hmm. When he the first half he walks out and shoots out. And it makes the 007. And then they do a montage for a minute If you look up GoldenEye teaser,
and then he says, "Were you expecting someone else?"
yes, yes,
Yeah.
it's one of the greatest movie promotions ever. And remember, we hadn't seen Bond for 6 years, other than it was License to Kill in '89, and now it's Christmas of '95 when we're getting GoldenEye. It's been 6 years, and for Bond fans and for the movie-going audience, since 1962 to 1989, we basically had Bond films for every 2 years.
Yeah.
The average every 2 years
for a while, every year even. Yeah.
and then it ended. I mean, there was 3 years between Mount the Golden Gun and Spy Love Me, only because it was a huge movie. But you went from 73 for Live and Let Die to 74 for Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah.
You went from 69 to On Her Majesty's Secret Service to 71 for Diamonds.
Every 2 years from Spy Who Loved Me to License to Kill. 77 to 89, every 2 years they got a movie out.
Yeah.
And it was just 2 years.
And then it was
then we had a 6-year drought. And when they came out with that GoldenEye teaser, I mean, it was mind blowing.
I think one of the best things that Dalton said in that one interview, and Kat, you remember this. I think they had asked him, because I think it was around that time he was promoting Penny Dreadful, and they had asked him, nobody talks about your Bond as much as they do Pierce Brosnan, Sean Connery, and now Daniel Craig. And the best response he could have ever given was, because I was good at my fucking job, basically. Because nobody talks because he was good at his job. License to Kill. Okay, perfect. That's a great response.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Living Daylights is a great Bond movie.
It is.
I celebrate Timothy Dalton's entire catalog.
That's back when they did stunts for real, like when they hung guys outside of an actual cargo plane on a net instead of doing the CGI green screen crap like you see in Uncharted.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
terrible.
the gas trucks. I love the gas trucks.
Kids, I have to go because my dogs are. I have to feed them.
You're good.
I have to give them dinner.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. I needed to. I thank you, Kat, for inviting. But yeah, we wanted experts talking about James Bond, and you are certainly that.
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert. I'm just a fan my whole life. I mean, look, I think that ultimately moving into it, I think Amazon has actually done I like Reacher a lot. I like The Boys. They've done a lot of great shows and made some great, like Manchester by the Sea. Amazon Studios has done a lot of great stuff, but like everything else, it's all about the people that make these things.
Yeah.
And I think the MGM division that the Amazon owns run it will have better chance of being good.
I mean, I hope so. I hope they.
One area they can improve on is the merchandise, because it's like you go to the official Bond store and most of it caters to wealthy people. There's a few things you can get, like key rings, but like clothing items are hundreds of dollars. They have these things that are out of touch. Like there's a figure they have there, which is a cross between like a Funko Pop, a Lego minifigure, Mickey Mouse, and like a Moonraker outfit. And it's like $2,000. Like, who's buying this?
Yeah, no one. I mean, look, I think that having Hot Toys get the license to see what they do with it's going to be really interesting. Will people buy it? I think,
and hopefully more affordable things.
All
right.
Agora Models is selling the 1/8 scale DB5 from Die Another Day that has all the things. I'm building their model of the Lotus Esprit. It's like this big. It's amazing. It's expensive, but it's amazing. You get, every month they send you parts. There's it's amazing, and it lights up, and the missiles, and it's just amazing. But hopefully with Amazon they'll make more use of it. We'll see.
We might get James Bond every 2 years from now on.
Maybe, I'd hope so, but you need visionaries.
Well,
A corporation buys it unless you have the people that know what they're doing. And this is my problem with all corporate entertainment. They're like, we're going to make it a thing. But look, entertainment still has to be made by people that know what they're doing. Star Trek hasn't been since 2009.
Except for Picard season 3, you know that.
Yeah,
but even that had, it wasn't perfect.
It wasn't perfect, but that's what, as you said from the very onset, you said this has been a franchise that has never been perfect. James Bond has its ups, it has its downs. I have hope, much like yourself, because I know you don't want bad James Bond. No one here does.
No, but listen, thanks for having me here.
And thank you for having me.
And great to see you all. Keep going and keep talking, but it's at least it's interesting. And you know what? One era ends, another begins. And
True.
it's amazing ultimately that we got 63 years of James Bond. And it's amazing 25 official Bond films, unofficial Bond films, unofficial things. It's amazing that, watch that documentary about George Lazenby. It's great.
Oh, and Roger Moore. There's a Roger Moore documentary.
Yep.
Yeah, there's so much stuff, and it's great. We had, my entire life, there's been James Bond movies.
And I'm under 40, and I've loved James Bond since I've been 8 years old.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well,
you're the exception.
I'm the exception.
Thanks again, Rob.
It's
good
seeing you.
Thanks, Rob.
All right. Thanks for having me, Catherine. Thanks for calling.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Now we have a lot of people in the chat.
Well, some of them are here, some of them aren't.
Yes, let's see who we got here.
Sorry, guys. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation. It's not that I don't value you. It's just that, Robert Fire Burnett. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you saw it.
When you have a special guest, you want to make sure we take full advantage of their time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say, but wasn't going to, challenging a few of the things that Rob has said. I don't think it's going to be as dire as he was making some of the stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing that I wanted to challenge, but I didn't want to turn it into a epic debate here. It's just like, at the end of the day, this franchise appeals to the most base needs and instincts of the audience. Guys, we want to go see the guy kick ass and see beautiful women, and the women, they like it when the guys look good. You're never.
But there's something more to that.
No, I know, but the basic elements of it is always going to bring people to the movie theater. That is never going to change. Just yesterday, I was watching. This might not be the best example, but just yesterday, I was watching an episode of the Rookie, and they have a little scene where you have these 3 women cops. They're detectives, accomplished, and for a joke, they have a scene where a guy that's a criminal they're trying to capture takes off his shirt in the middle of the scene. They're all just like, "Ooh, hello, what is this happening?" And I'm like, really, we just stopped for this? But at the end of the day, it's the tale is all its time. They're always going to go for their base instincts. It's never going to be a problem. It's never going to change, and there is really never going to be.
I understand what you're talking about. Are you referring to that sort of, if you can see something televised or if you can see something depicted, then you won't pursue it?
There's a little bit of that there, yes, but it's not the end of the world that, because people have already seen it, they're not going to want it. They're always going to want it.
Yeah, exactly. I do think the physical touch.
Women can, Scott, you and I have talked about this before. Women will always be about, wanting to feminism and all that, but at the end of the day, they are going to surrender to their basic needs.
Well, and
just like guys are always going to surrender to their basic needs.
And I do also subscribe to it's about, like, I believe in the collectivism because I think that we should all be going towards a common goal. But individualism always gets in the way. And the thing is that if the world is telling you don't be a nasty, then sometimes the nasties are going to come together and they're going to figure out how to do that nasty.
And the whole thing with, James Bond is a sex and misogyny. Yeah, guess what? A lot of women go see the movies, no matter how sexist or misogynist it might be. They want to see the seduction. There's appeal to it, the seduction.
But I think the issue is less about that and more about, will the current now new owners, Amazon, actually be able to deliver that, right? Because the fear is they're just gonna basically wrap James Bond in a ultra action-packed movie that kind of strips away all of the main tenets that make a Bond movie, right?
Hire Edgar Wright.
A kind of a homogenized, or maybe that's the wrong word, a less
nerfed.
Yeah, a nerfed version. And I think that's really the core of Rob's argument there was, and mine too, is that we're gonna get this watered down version of Bond that only appeals to the modern audience in a way that they like to go see big blockbuster movies.
Right.
I think that's what we're gonna get, unless, like Kat said, if the people at MGM are open to tourist writers and directors coming in with a vision and a pitch, then I think we'll get good stuff. If it's just the bean counters making the decisions, we're gonna get crappy tentpole style.
Well, that's what goes back to my central thing, is that I think the reason, after nearly 3 years after buying the company, that they're only now saying, "Oh, we're going to retire." It's not just that the Brinks truck backed up. It's like, I think that Wall Street Journal article was right on the money. It's like, we're at a stalemate.
I think you are putting far too much credence towards that, because the what do they call it? Public domain has been releasing for the novels for, like, in Canada, the Ian Fleming James Bond novels they're public domain.
I know. And
so it is something that, even with this billionaire that you're referring to, I haven't read the article, so if I sound stupid, it's same as it ever was. But it's just going to be like, this is just more legalese. And now that if Amazon was going to be the one who has to defend the honor of keeping James Bond in one house.
Oh, no, I wasn't talking about that article. I was talking about the Wall Street Journal.
Well, but what I just said about that article, how do you feel about that?
Well, again, I think it's because they don't trust Barbara and Michael's instincts, because they want to trust the algorithm. Well, the algorithm says we should pick somebody based on blah,
based
blah, blah.
on what are you saying that? Are you basing that on Rings of Power, or based on the announcement? What are you basing this on?
The Wall Street Journal article from December. That's the one. They've been at a stalemate for nearly 2.5 years now, because Barbara and Michael have their own way of doing it, that they've been doing it since they took over in 95.
Michael has been dismissed since No Time to Die.
He's still been there in the office. It's not like he's still there as a consultant. But I'm saying,
yes, the 83-year-old is coming into the office.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the realism of this machination that you've developed, and based on what has been reported on what is essentially the business operations of what could be a movie, all you're talking about is the business, and that is very closely guarded information that you have aside from gossip.
What I'm saying is, if they didn't want to work with them and do their own thing, they would have backed up the Brinks truck the moment they bought it and give them the $1 billion buyout right then and there and be on their way.
Right.
They didn't do that, because it seemed like they wanted to work with them. They even put out a statement when they first bought it. Not only were they excited to work with Barbara and Michael, they said, we're patient. We're not going to rush it. We're going to let them do their thing. Well, here we are 2.5 years later, and they got no traction anywhere. And all of a sudden,
but this is also based on the business plan of what Amazon is doing. But I'm just saying, I disagree with your hypothesis of leverage.
I didn't say it was a matter of leverage. I'm saying
you said the billionaire guy who was.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about.
I'm incorporating.
Let Catherine finish, and maybe you'll understand what she's trying to tell you.
I'm telling you that when they first bought it, they were excited to work with Barbara and Michael, and they assured the fans that, don't worry, we're not going to rush it. They could take their time, and we'll get it right.
Yes.
2.5 years later, they haven't had any traction. They haven't cast anybody. Nothing's going on. And then then all of a sudden, they've backed up the.
But why is that?
Well, if you shut up and I can explain it. All of a sudden, they back up the Brinks truck and give them $1 billion buyout.
Saw that.
Full creative control. It's like, well, you have to ask yourself, what changed in the last 2.5 years between we're excited to work with them and we're going to be patient and take our time to we want to buy you out and don't want to work with you. Basically, that's what that means. It's like they're not going to have
right. But what does that mean? What happened?
The stalemate that was reported on in the Wall Street Journal.
What was that stalemate based upon?
Based upon the fact that they don't like Rob was saying, they like to do, like, when corporations buy these things, they want to trust.
No, I don't care about the generalizations of corporations. I want to say specifically about the
article.
Scott. It was in the article from the quotes, Scott. Go back and read it.
Okay, I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to go read an article. It would be too difficult to explain.
It's not difficult to explain. It's easy. It's like they like to trust their analytics.
Well, then go ahead.
they trust their analytics. They don't like the idea of picking a semi-unknown for the role because to them that's a big gamble. They don't want to do that, even though it's worked for the last 6
This
years.
is confirmed in a Wall Street Journal article?
Yes, you did. Did you not read the article when we went over this 2 months ago?
You know I can't read.
Well, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Because remember, they said, because you have to ask yourself the same thing. There's clearly validity with all the insiders were quoted in that article, because otherwise, why wait 2.5 years and not do anything and suddenly buy them out of their entire creative interest?
Well, because they're stalemating one of the biggest. Yeah. So why is this? They finally got enough money or something. They finally got fed up.
Well, no, I'm saying Amazon obviously had the money. They could have bought their creative. They could have bought out Barbara and Michael the minute the acquisition went through, but they didn't, because they genuinely wanted to work with them. As they said when they first bought it, we're excited to work with them. We will be patient. And they said, we'll be patient. We'll let them do their thing. Well, here we are 2.5 years later, and nothing's changed.
And so who is the bad guy in that negotiation?
I don't think there is a bad guy. I think the Broccolis had a vision for Bond, and Amazon has.
But I don't think they did.
Yeah, I believe they did.
No, I
mean, you didn't right before we went live.
No, I mean a vision in terms of how they do these things.
Right.
They go on their gut. They know who they want to cast. They feel the room, and that's not what Amazon does, because corporations trust their analytics. Like, how do you think?
I don't think that Barbara wanted to do it anymore.
I don't see it. That's the thing. I don't believe, because if she didn't want to do it, then why not sell her interest when Amazon first bought?
Because of time, because of the relationships that soured while she was developing or attempting to move forward while doing her own projects, realized that she was being hounded by someone and was just like, what the fuck? I'm sick of this shit. I'm out.
It's possible.
Well, that's speculation on your part, then.
But all of this is fucking speculation.
I agree. No, I agree with Scott that it is purely speculative, because we're never going to know the real reason why they caved and just gave the creative rights. It's very likely that they just, to Scott's point, it's very likely that they got fed up with Amazon bringing down their necks. Hey, I know we said we were patient and we wanted to work with you, but can you give us a fucking movie already for my fucking purchase?
And they got so impatient that they made a game show. Tell me that wasn't like a little bit of a stab in the back. We'll wait for Eon Productions, but in the meantime, we'll make, like, even Brian Cox said,
I know, but
when they hired me.
That's my point. Is that
if you would just let me finish.
But it's the same thing. But you just made the point for me, Scott. Is that they want to rush this thing and dilute. They said they wanted to work with them. And to your point, they weren't doing it because even though they still had creative control, they still have to collaborate. The thing is, they both have to agree. That it's not that one had a majority over the other. It was 50-50. And Barbara and Michael had a way they wanted to do it. We're not going to do your corporate analytics bullshit. And remember when they said in the article that they couldn't even get to the top person in charge of Amazon Prime Video Studios? They could only get level 6 and a level 8. It's like they're not able, they're not respecting it. They're having the meetings where they're referring to it as content. Like, they don't respect the specialty of that franchise. And so Barbara and Michael, like, we're going to stick to our guns on this. And so I'm asking, why is it after sticking to their guns for 2.5 years, all of a sudden they stop? Because if Amazon didn't like this, they could have backed up the Brinks truck immediately. Why did they wait this long to do it? And I think it's because they both genuinely wanted to work together. They both had two very different competing visions on how to do that. And so Amazon just said, fine, we're just going to buy you out. And realizing that Barbara and Michael were not going to compromise their values, they figured, fine, we'll just sell it then, because we can't move. We're at an impasse. We cannot move forward. We will not compromise. So you might as well just pay us our money and we'll go.
And let's be honest, $1 billion, man.
$1 billion.
Exactly.
Right now, in this time in history, $1 billion for them. I'd like it would. I would be shocked if they turned it down.
Right, exactly.
And there is an old quote from Cubby Broccoli that says, don't let temporary people make permanent decisions.
Exactly.
And I think that at a certain point, I want Barbara Broccoli to be a shepherd of James Bond forever. But that's not a reality. And I think that her decision has more to do with, you know what? I don't need this headache. $1 billion? Sure. That'll get rid of this headache.
Right.
Right, but that's my point. It's like the reason they didn't back up the Brinks truck to buy it from her 3 years ago was because initially they meant what they said when they wanted to work with her. And they're like, yeah, we'll be patient, but they didn't think it was going to take this long. But the reason it took this long is because neither side has majority. They had to agree.
Right.
And Barbara and Michael have had a non-analytical, non-corporate way of doing this since 1995, which was a carryover from what their father did going back to 1962. And Amazon's like, that's not the game we play. We don't want to do that. And so they're like, well, fine, then we're not going to move forward. And they tried, they worked back and forth. It wasn't getting anywhere. And so finally they backed up the Brinks truck, and that's what happened, which is why I'm worried and not as optimistic about it, because if they can't understand how a franchise that's been around for 63 years has longevity already, oh, we need to think how to make it last longer. It's like, I agree with them that they could do better on merchandising because you can make gangbusters on that. But the idea that there's no longevity and they need to reinvent the wheel to find out how to make it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, guys, it's been reinventing itself constantly for 60 years. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is, and honestly, this is what I think just what Amazon's problem is that they're going to focus on serialization. Exactly. They're going to make sure of a shared universe or timeline or something. And that's what it is when, and Rob said it before, you guys referenced it this evening. Don't put your universe in ahead of your story or characters. And so they don't have to make an entire world. They need to make one movie so that we can believe in their merchandise while they make the next movie.
And I honestly think that if they had already had Bond 26 out, this would have been a much easier thing for them to accomplish because they already would have had the next actor and the new tone set. But because it's not, it's like, it's not just a decision for Bond 26. It's likely a decision for Bond 26 through 31 or 32. That's another 10, 15 year thing. And Amazon's like, we don't trust you to make all of those decisions. We want to have a say, and we want to, and to your point, they want to serialize it. And Barbara and Michael are like, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to.
But they already did that.
Right. But like you pointed out, it was a concession that Barbara and Michael were making to them to buy time to try and keep the negotiations going. It's like, here, you can have this while we're, and remember, decades ago, they did that horrible James Bond Jr. thing, which didn't work out.
Oh, someone in the chat brought up James Bond Jr. Right. I love James Bond Jr. I played the Nintendo game.
They gave them the Road to a Million show as a concession so they could buy time to negotiate. And it's like, if two sides have reached an impasse, and now you have this lawsuit going on for a copyright, which again, as I pointed out, a billionaire's got his own legal team and all that kind of stuff. He's not going to waste his time on that unless he thinks there's a legitimate chance that he could win, which is further Amazon putting further pressure saying, hey guys, we need to fucking get moving on this because you could lose your copyright at this point. So it's like, but Barbara and Michael are like, if you're not going to trust us to do what our family's been doing for 60 years, then pay us our money.
You know what's funny about all this is that we saw this happen. If you've seen the show Succession, we saw all this happen in Succession. And the Kieran Culkin character, who's the asshole of the whole thing, he's the kind of character where if you were to explain, like you're saying, Kat, it's like, if you're not going to trust what we've been doing for our family for 60 years, then we don't want to work with you. This is our family, legacy. The Kieran Culkin would have been like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about your family legacy. I want a movie now, yesterday. And that's pretty much, we saw a TV show depicting this exact thing happening, and we're seeing it now, art imitating life. In reverse.
Life imitating art. Yeah.
So it's one of the, it's sad. It's sad because I kind of like when Steve, you says like you would have been shocked had they had turned down $1 billion price. I would have been in favor of them turning out. Okay, well, no, we're not going to accept $1 billion. We're actually going to spend $1 billion and keep it to ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I see that point. I agree with that.
Like if they really wanted,
I would have respected it completely, but if
they really wanted to have kept it, if they really wanted to give the middle finger to Amazon, okay, you know what? Fuck you. We're not going to work with you. We're going to take Bond. We're going to buy it out from MGM. It's ours, and we're going to find another studio to start a new legacy with.
I don't think would they even be able to buy it out from MGM because Amazon owns MGM now.
Whatever the legal loophole they would have had to find to separate Bond from MGM, and like
I don't think they have. I don't think they have the capital to go. I mean,
Amazon would just bog that down in lawsuits.
Arbitrary. They've been making Bond for so long, and they don't have the capital to take it back.
Not away from Amazon.
The Amazon could just bog you down with arbitrary.
Now,
no
MGM,
motion.
if it was just
They'll
MGM
never make
on
a
its
movie.
own,
They'll never
yes,
make a movie.
but
No,
no.
that
no,
would've
it's like Steve's right. If it was before the buyout and if it was MGM, and if they heard that the whispers were going to be that Amazon might get this and this is how they do things, then yeah, maybe then they'd have the money to
Well,
buy
then
it.
that was very fucking naive of them, because how the fuck would you not expect this to happen?
Well, yeah, then they could have done their homework better on that.
Which is kind of like now sad thinking about it. Because wait, it's Amazon. How did you not think this was going to happen? Jeff Bezos.
Because they might have believed them when they said we're going to trust you to do what you do. They might have believed that.
Well, they made a deal with a supervillain basically, and Bond wasn't there to save
them.
them.
Did you see that? Jeff Bezos commented today. He posted on Twitter. He says, "So, who do you guys want to see play James Bond?"
Yeah.
Which is really bizarre.
And they get flooded with Henry Cavill.
But this is what's bizarre about that. It's like Barbara and Michael can't get a meeting with anybody above level 6 at Prime Video, but Jeff Bezos is paying attention to this. It's like, why was there that disconnect that they can't get into the room to talk to the top people to begin with? You know,
he was probably bored enough to actually pick up his phone and get on social media.
But now I'm going to do what I mentioned.
Into space on his penis-shaped rocket.
Yeah, but now I'm going to do what I promised to do a while ago, which is the chat, and we're going to race through this so we're not here all night. Eugene Bird, sold. Slasher Fred says, even though it's not a Bond film, the 1965 film The Spy Who Came In From the Cold is the movie that people got serious of the Cold War. I did watch that movie. I like the book. I didn't like the movie very much. I thought the movie was a bit stale.
I don't like the movie.
But you like the movie? That's cool. DJ Play Nice, rock. Thanks for hosting. Awesome. Swift -1. Hey, Matt G. Hello. Swift -1.
Hello.
DJ Play Nice. Oh, yeah. Says hi to Scotty. Oh, hey. He says, I just want to hear Scotty say Pussy Galore with absolutely no reference to a Bond movie.
Pussy Galore.
Even when that movie came out and I saw it for the first time and she came on and say, my name is Pussy Galore, I'm just like, no fucking way that's an actual line in this movie.
Well, it's better than Holly Goodhead.
Yeah. Right. Tom says you need to wake up, Scott.
I did. Come on, I was letting people talk for once.
Right.
Tom says, how much did you pay for that lifelike replica of Steve?
He's sitting here listening.
Yeah, like Steve is here in the flesh.
Tom.
Olga Kulinko
Hubba.
Oh, and he's doing a shout out for True Noir by Rob. Oh, we should have advertised that while he was here.
Yeah.
Gold member. Yes, they took the gold member Twister Spectre. Could they?
See, that was the 1-2 punch. It was Austin Powers followed by the Bourne Identity, kind of irrelevanced.
Tom says, sounds like they pushed out Barbara and Michael. No, they just backed up the Brinks truck.
Yeah.
Tom says, Lola's.
Cash.
Lola's, I thought she was a showgirl.
She was.
She was at the Copacabana.
Kat, what would your grandfather say about the news, about the perception of Bond today? Ooh, what would my grandfather say about it? He wouldn't understand the streaming thing entirely or the whole corporate analytics thing for that. But I remember he's the one who introduced me to Bond films. I remember we were staying in Arizona for like a couple weeks. We went to the video store, and GoldenEye had just come on VHS because they had the big poster in there, and I was immediately drawn to it. And he's like, well, come over here. And then we went to the James Bond section. As a little kid, it blew my mind that a character would have their own section in the video store. So I thought this must be the coolest thing ever. And I insisted we rent GoldenEye, but he also rented the Fab 4, and we watched those over the next 5 days. And it was awesome. Nice. And even though I could have kept watching Bond movies when I went home after the trip to California, I waited and would only watch them when going back to visit him. So it was like a special thing we did for a while. So that was really cool. But assuming you were up to speed on the analytics, I don't think he would like the idea of corporate analytics dictating something which the family has had the pulse on for this long.
Well, and I just have to say that I don't know what my grandfather would say. I never really watched James Bond with my grandfather, but I know that when I pre-ordered No Time to Die for my dad on Blu-ray, and I gave it to him, we watched it, he handed it to me, and he said, get this out of my house and never have it return. That was the worst fucking thing I have ever seen associated with James Bond. And he already was not a fan. of Daniel Craig. So it doesn't fucking like you don't have to go back to to your grandfather. My dad's 75 and he was just like James Bond died. Yep. And that's what really
my
grandfather blew me away.
Yeah. My grandfather was 74 when he first showed me that.
Sure. Yeah. And my dad was like, what, 35 when he showed me the first James Bond movie? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
My dad was a Connery Bond guy. And when they made the change, he decided that he would never watch Bond again.
That was it, right?
God, what a depressing murder's row of reactions your parents have.
Yeah, no, they hated it, but that's what I'm saying. Like that's the theory that I have is that James Bond, once there is a generational gap between you and James Bond, you're going to give up on James Bond too. And guess what's happening in real time right now?
No, it's going to be fine.
That's what I'm hoping, dude. That's what I want.
Like, even though
it's not going to be as detrimental as you're making it sound to be. Worst case scenario, it's going to be a bad stream of films, but the character is going to bounce back regardless.
And what I would like to posit is just that right now is a definitive change in the production of James Bond movies. It's undeniable if we're going from a Broccoli era to a non-Broccoli era. I'm sure in 10, 15 years, people are going to look back at the Craig movies and say, oh, don't we wish we had those halcyon days? Like, people are going to sit there and say the best thing ever about the Daniel Craig era, as we do now as I do about Timothy Dalton.
Look, there's a possibility that the films get better. There's a possibility they come out of the gate and they have a good solid team and a good plan, cast the right people,
and they need to stop chasing trends.
Amazing films.
I think Edgar Wright. Get Edgar Wright.
They need to stop they need to stop chasing trends. If they stop worrying about what other franchises do and do their own thing.
And that's the thing.
What, like Moonraker?
Do that?
No. Well, Moonraker was obviously worrying about Star Wars. We have to respond to Star Wars.
Right.
But
you're referring to something that historically has already happened throughout the history of James Bond, saying, don't do that again. And I guess that's, yeah.
I meant like to Rob's point, that in the 60s, Bond was setting trends. And then since the 70s, he's been following them and trying to copy what other people are doing and worrying about that instead of trusting the basic tenets of the character. Like Casino Royale works not just because it's a faithful adaptation of the book, but because it's very character-driven and is trusting the basic tenets of the character, which is not only that he has a license to kill, that he's ruthless, loves beautiful women and all that, but it gives you this high life type exotic, that you want to go to as, like, say, a working class fan. You want to go to the best places and sit there and have your drink and watching him drinking martinis and stuff like that. You don't, it's not just what plot are we going to recycle for the umpteenth time.
Not only that, but also, and to sort of expand on what Rob was saying in the basis of sexuality, but also, like, it used to be, like, in the 60s, James Bond movies were a travel log. They were, you wouldn't be able to see vibrant full color imagery of far off places, like what the James Bond Island in Thailand. Like, that is something that you would never be able to see. And now you can see Instagram reels and TikToks, or, you know what? It's not that outlandish to be able to go and see it for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, there is that, the world is smaller. But I still think that there are ways to open it up. I do want to thank Old Man Bird for his little Bishibo, I think that's what they're called, holding a trophy. Old Man Bird also said in the chat that this must be a record. This has got to be a record for the Phantasmagorium.
No,
it's not.
It's not.
This is Junior League. This is the Whopper Junior of the show.
We're doing pretty good, though. Thank you for the compliment.
I think, thanks for the compliment. I think we do have an 8-hour show.
Yes,
I remember.
I don't remember it.
Hallows Eve. Yeah, we just barely remember that. Devil's Night show.
Tom says he likes Rob's idea for a Spectre show, but I would add that they do the building of it, and at some point just bring in Bond, but you wait to bring in Bond.
I wouldn't mind that. Kind of like, isn't that what they do in The Spy Who Loved Me? Is that James Bond? It's written from the perspective of the Anya, and then you don't get them until the end.
But if you do a Spectre show, then we're constantly going to have Scott bitching about where Bond is every episode, like he did with the Penguin. And
I never watched the Penguin.
Right, but that's precisely the point. You wouldn't watch it because Batman wasn't in it.
Same deal with but I have that problem.
You're not watching something has never stopped you from commenting.
Yeah.
Herc 130 says,
I don't like it.
Herc says, I don't want to feel like I'm sitting in the middle of an alligator pit with James Bond about to die.
And I saw that, Herc, when Rob was talking about the virtual reality, and I didn't want to interject, and I'm hoping I have an opportunity to speak about it in the future. I agree with him about technology opening things up, but there is something about sitting in an auditorium with people and being aware of them around you that is the collective experience of cinema. And while the technology of putting on virtual reality, or however that's going to work, I think the one thing about cinema that makes it cinema is that collective experience.
Sure.
Tom says he wants
Sorry.
I was going to say, Tom says he wants a Bond movie like the Indiana Jones game, where it feels like you're in the middle of a movie and a decent story. It'd be nice if the games could get back to that. They used to make good games, and then unfortunately they started becoming almost like a Doom game, where get from point A to point B and kill as many people as possible. And there were no more objectives. It wasn't stealth. It was just it wasn't fun anymore. And and that's when the games started losing sales, and then they let it peter out.
You know, the last good James Bond game that's not a James Bond game that actually makes you, as the player, really think about how you're going to do your mission and succeed in it was the most recent Hitman game.
Yeah.
And they're the ones making the new game, the new Bond game.
Yeah, so hopefully they can take those lessons and make a quintessential new era in that video game, because nothing has been good to me as a fan of this franchise for the video games. Nothing has been able to top GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64. Even the remake wasn't able to top it.
Sure.
And Nightfall has a special place in my heart.
Nightfire
has a special place in my heart.
Everything or Nothing is good as well. There are a couple of those EA games from the early 2000s. Agent Under Fire, exactly. Those got closer, but of course, I'm arguing against GoldenEye for the N64 is like arguing against Sean Connery or listening to the Beatles without earmuffs.
And I thought the World Is Not Enough N64 was also decent. It was the same kind of idea. Same exact idea, actually. Like, depending on what difficulty setting you had and other objectives you had to do. The one major complaint with that is that the AI wasn't as, the AI bots you're facing weren't as effective. There were kind of, I guess, some problems.
Virtually, if you're a Bond video gamer, and if you have a system in their regard, I get those games. Those games are probably those are going to be gold now, and they already are.
Well, GoldenEye was added. The N64 GoldenEye was remastered on Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah, but I just mean those other ones like Agent Under Fire, even the shitty ones, what they did the remake of James Bond Legends. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of things, those are the if you want to revisit the classics and you haven't played them yet, they're amazing.
Herc 130 says new Bond character, Pussy No More.
That's right. Or as I like to call it in my neighborhood, a dick.
DJ Play Nice says, you're bumming me out, Rob. Too much Doom in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah. Can I ask, just as someone who doesn't think it's that dire, but
I don't think it's that dire.
Where did we go from No Time to Die to now, where we're concerned about where Bond fits in the world?
I think that comes from a lot of, frankly, millennials, because I read so many articles between all the delays of No Time to Die that it always starts out with some young writer and they're like, well, I've only seen a couple of these movies, and then they proceed to trash the whole franchise and say, how does he fit in this world? Because they're thinking of him as, again, like the original novels, he was a colonialist British fantasy, but the movies never really were that. The movies got away from that by highlighting just general male fantasy. So when I hear people say, he doesn't fit in the world, I'm like, you're being too, frankly, leftist. This is just a fun franchise.
Yeah, and watch all the movies before you have an opinion.
Right. Yeah, But my thing is that ever since No Time to Die came out, and we've had this 4-year gap. Again, it's not that big of a fucking gap. Calm the fuck down. It's only been 4 years because a lot of people, especially when I'm listening to Campia, always talking about, where's the next movie? Why have it's been 4 years? How the fuck do you know? It's been 4 years, Campia. It's not the end of the world. Calm down.
Not even that 3 years, 4 months.
Yeah, exactly. Call me when it's been 15 years, and then I'll jump on the bandwagon. Yeah, where the fuck is the next James Bond movie? It's been 15 years.
I do understand that perspective, and I think it's something that is encapsulated with modern audiences. When you're trying to appeal to modern audiences, you have to keep them on their toes. You have to have what is next. Like, I know Red Letter Media makes fun of, give me new product, don't ask questions, what are next? Well, what are next might be good, and it often isn't. But every now and then a diamond shows up, and that's when you're like, oh, there may be some steam.
Yeah,
like it is something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's good to look forward. What I'm trying to get at is, when I hear that question, my immediate answer is same as when the last Bond movie came out. When it comes out, people will go see it.
Well, but also, like, Ernesto, that's what I'm saying when it comes to, oh no, it's going to be a saturation of the the what? How do you say it, Kat?
Like a dilution of the brand.
That's it.
Yeah.
But also, we look back to the 60s, and there was a new James Bond movie every 2 years, and so we're looking down the barrel of, what if they just made? What if that's what they focus on? Amazon doesn't do any spin-offs. Makes a shit ton of merchandise, but just they focus on, much like Reacher, and instead of making a 8-episode television show, or like Fallout, instead of making a 10-episode television show, or maybe it was 8, I don't remember, they just make a James Bond movie every 2 years. And my only request, instead of making a television show, make a cinematic movie, and Amazon gets their own theater chain.
Yeah. Tom says he loves The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and needs to get the entire box set of the original TV show.
Oh, shit. Tom, I'll be back in a second.
My parents bought the DVD attaché case of the whole original series. They watched the first episode and they gave up on it because they're like, this is not as good as we remember when we were little kids.
Look at him go. He's actually got a spine, a back. He's got lower legs. Damn, Scott, you actually are human. You're not just a guy from the waist up. Look at him. He's so giddy.
While he's doing that, Jill gives us a nice PSA saying, don't read and drive. That's why we have audiobooks.
That's right.
Yes, it is.
You haven't seen me drive while playing Pokemon on the DS.
Let's see.
I guess I don't know. I was just getting a little slightly frustrated just listening to the doom and gloom. I'm like, okay, I mean, yeah, it's not a good look that it's now Amazon 100% and they might mess it up. But until we see it, we're going to go one of two ways. We called it, or, hey, you actually didn't fuck it up.
Lamentations 11:16 says.
Here.
Yep, that's the same one I got right there.
Yep, nice.
Nice.
Yeah, great.
I don't have that one.
I love that movie. The movie was great.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna turn the camera on real quick. Just to deviate from one franchise to the other. This is the new official design of the upcoming Raptors.
Oh.
I like it. It's got a combination of the ones from Jurassic Park 3 and The Lost World all in one.
It's like these emaciated arms. DJ Playnice says,
you want him to have more protein? Is that what you're saying?
Lamentations 11:16. Tom asks Scott, can't believe you, or no, he says he can't believe you paid Robin hookers and blow.
I can't.
It's the only way to get him on the show.
But the question is it Peruvian blow?
Well, no. Credit where credit is due, and all joking aside, thank you so much for reaching out, Kat. It's great. Like, it's amazing that we're all PGSers. We're all Post Geek Singularity members. So
I wish you just.
It's nice. It's nice to have Rob pop in, and he does from time to time. So.
Yeah,
Especially on these kind of shows when the hot topic.
DJ Play Nice says it just may have been too long since he's had butterflies. You can still get them, man. Trust.
see, I'm with you, DJ.
Yeah, we can. Older, I think if people of a certain age can, but Rob's specifically talking about the youngest generation.
I disagree, and I think
that's fine,
come on.
It's okay to be wrong.
If there are still proms, there are still people getting to know each other's bodies.
Yeah, but here's the thing. My generation discovered we were like that switch from analog to digital when it came to being exposed to pornography. Mine was, you would find the occasional Playboy that was still around, VHS to DVD, and then the internet, which is how it is now. And right now, the generation coming after with the Zoomers and the next one, they like he said, it's going to be a click of the button. Yes, they'll be exposed to it, but you can be exposed to everything and anything in the world. But when you go out into the real world, none of that shit is going to help you.
Hey man, I have 4 AI girlfriends. So
there is an argument to be made that the desensitization, right? You get desensitized to these things.
Yeah, but that's only if you are exposed to the media that desensitizes you.
Yeah.
Like
but he's not wrong that 10-year-old kids have immediate access to some of the most deplorable shit on the internet at any
until it happens in real life.
Yeah.
Well,
because when you're watching it, you're watching
Keiko Pegs.
Well, let me put it this way: when you're watching a movie and you see someone in the best execution possible, see them get their head chopped off, you're like, "Oh my god, that was horrifying." But when you see it happen in real life, there is no amount of desensitization for you to not have a reaction. It's the same way how when someone kills someone for the first time, they're always going to have a puke.
Well, that's the thing that I was trying to equate it with in terms of the James Bond. You'd seen him and you played Nintendo 64 version of James Bond, but that's not really, equating sex and violence. It's a James Bond perspective. But the thing is that like it's been happening since forever. Is you see something happen that doesn't necessarily mean it substitutes. And it seems like it's like a National Geographic Sears catalog sort of argument, or video games make people do things, and it's like no, the media doesn't make you do things. You may be repulsed, you may be engaged, and I would hope in the more tender aspects. Then you're engaged.
Of course, you're right. In general, I think Rob is being a bit hyperbolic for effect. To make a point,
possibly, but he's still a brilliant guest.
He is.
Daniel's Hot Topic says the great James Bond is long gone.
I disagree.
No, he's just taking a nap.
And in the next one, Daniel's Hot Topics wants to kill Scott with a heart attack. Apparently,
that makes sense. But don't worry, I'm on my way.
He says Star Trek 09 was awesome and is the best Star Trek movie.
Oh boy!
I don't think it's the best one, but I don't think it's that bad.
Daniel, if you're still around, if you really want to give him a heart attack, just write it on a death note.
I don't know. I don't watch your cartoons.
I don't watch your cartoons.
Well, Netflix made a live action movie, so technically speaking, you have.
Yeah, but they also made Cowboy Bebop.
But it's live action.
It says, from behind the veil of a more innocent time is not the best perspective anyway. Maybe. Wonder, surprise, and amazement still on tap for every generation. Less naive doesn't mean worse. True.
I'm fine with this argument, or like this rationale. Absolutely, DJ. I still think that there is going to be that too awkward and too soon pawing at the breast, speaking as a heterosexual male, and it's going to be like, stop it. All right, fine.
And girls are always going to develop faster than boys. That's never going to change.
Exactly. Why do you think there is MILF porn?
Next.
Daniel's Hot Topic says, to all the Canadians here, have you ever been to the Stone Road Mall in Guelph, Ontario? I'll be there tomorrow. Me and my mom will be shopping and going to the food court. I love the food court.
Daniel's Hot Topics. There are 2 stores that you have to go to. The obvious one is going to be Toys R Us, and the other one is Cinema One. It's a little pricey, but it's got really good selection in terms of physical media. So, yeah, I would recommend that, and the food court is awesome.
I miss Ponderosa.
DJ Playnight says we're awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I've
DJ.
always been awesome.
Daniel's Hot Topic says James Bond multiverse
always.
and shared universe incoming. I have a feeling that
considering-
might be the case.
I'm hoping not, but like I said, as soon as they announce their first TV show, I'm going to be like, yeah, okay.
So,
It's coming.
well, on that topic, what do you think is the worst case scenario of a shared universe?
Oh, like, have you
Because
seen the Batman franchise? I don't want Pennyworth. I don't want Gordon. I don't want Birds of Prey. I'm looking for fucking Batman. What do you want? Do you want the Sonyverse Spider-Man movies? I don't give a shit about Venom. I don't give a fuck about Madam Web. I want Spidey.
Yeah.
That's what I'm afraid of.
No,
Okay.
yeah, and it's like the thing that came out of the report that
So
they're
you're
thinking, like,
afraid. So you're afraid of it being like the Fast and the Furious franchise, stupid?
No, what I'm afraid of is watching a James Bond movie without James Bond.
yeah, like the Moneypenny series they're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, like I mentioned, the entire point of that character is that they flirt with Bond, and the joke is that they never get together. That's the joke. There's nothing else.
And
to
they
that joke.
joked about making a series about Aunt May and how she met Ben, but that never came to fruition.
No, I know, but
the worst
Craven the
case
Hunter
scenario-
did. Morbius did.
The worst case scenario was Madam Web, but again, that wasn't about them. It was about a character that only has 2 comics to her name.
Are you talking about Madam Web?
Yes.
DJ Play Nice.
Madam Web has
My
like
damn
30 years of history. At least.
2 comics to her name.
As the title character, yes, but she's been a supporting character. Yeah.
2
How many
comics
more?
to her name. I don't think you're getting my reference here.
No, I'm not.
That she's insignificant and they made a whole movie about it. It's
So, yeah, exactly. So
I
I
just
don't really give a shit about a Q movie if he isn't being surly with James
Yeah.
Bond.
I think the worst case scenario is going to be that they're going to make a bad movie. That's it. Right now, that is the worst case scenario. Bad movies.
Do you want to see M as an Afghanistan trooper? Because that's what I'm afraid of.
What? I don't get the question.
Well, no, what
You
you're
don't
saying
wanna
is that
see-
if it's an insignificant character, and I'm not saying M is insignificant, but what I'm saying is that do I need to see 6 seasons of M
In high school.
being a junior officer?
Well, you're assuming that they're going to make a series 2 that is going to make it past a season.
Okay, no, but now you're getting into semantics because what you said is a 2 comic book character, and that's what I'm saying about M.
They're not
And
going
that's
to
what
make
I'm
an
afraid
M
of.
series. They're not going to make an M series.
How do you know?
Yeah.
They already said in the Wall Street Journal article that they wanted to do a Moneypenny series. It's like, why?
Yeah, and then it's going to blow up in their face and they're not going to make it.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't dissuade your argument. You're saying, "Oh, why are you so worried?" Well, that's why I'm
a lot
worried.
of Marvel Phase 4 and 5 is blown up in their face.
Okay, but you're using the superhero model method that.
So
Let me
that's
finish.
what they're
Let me
using.
finish. Let me finish, and then you can pile on me because I know that's what you're gonna do. We
You're
already
on the
saw
bottom.
we saw a perfect example of the Star Wars franchise falling on its face by trying to emulate the Marvel method, and it didn't work out for them, and it diluted the product. At the very least, whoever's going to be giving the reins of this franchise will probably look at that and be like, you know what? Let's not do that, but let's still satisfy the corporate overlords.
Again, I don't think they're that intelligent about it, and because if they were, then I think they would have been much more open to working with Barbara and Michael. We wouldn't be at this juncture that we're at now.
Well, then,
I
but do we know exactly who specifically was pressuring them?
No.
Okay,
No, it's like, again, it was the deal originally was a 50-50. They both had to agree, and they weren't agreeing.
okay, but
And
we're
for some
saying
reason-
Amazon as the et al in the room when really maybe it wasn't. Maybe maybe it was probably Bezos the one pressuring them, or maybe it was the media portion of Amazon. We don't know who was pressuring them.
Well, whoever signed that $1 billion check is probably the one who was pressuring them. Because I don't know would that money have come straight from the Prime Video Fund? Would have come?
Well, it would definitely had to have been given approval from the main head honcho.
Right. That's what I mean. It's like, but yeah, that's that kind of thing. But yeah, it's like that's the fear is that it's going to be shared universe. We're going to do all these spinoffs, and we'll see where they go. But DJ Playnight says he digs the positivity and optimism.
Yeah. Hey, like it could be good. It could be good.
I think where I'm coming from is that we've seen what happens when we have the knee-jerk reaction. Yes, there have been times where, hey, you just proved our point. You did exactly the one thing we feared. And there have been other times where we actually sat back, watched to see what they do, and there were some very good results all the time.
Of course.
Good. Sure. And I think this is that.
This is day one. Ernesto, this is day one. So
yeah,
it will be a knee-jerk reaction for sure.
I know. Well, I guess hindsight being 2020, the last 8 years have taught me lately, you know what? Let's actually wait and see what happens.
Sure.
Let's not pre-hate just yet. And when they actually do something, then we can hate.
Right.
Because the pre-hate, honestly, and I've been guilty of this too, the pre-hate has not helped us at all.
No,
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree with you wholeheartedly. The thing is, and the reason we're sort of convening here is I am optimistic. I'm hoping that they do right by Jim. But, with historical, like hindsight being 2020, you look at your
Star Treks and your Star Wars and things like that.
I was going to say Rings of Time specifically, but all of those things are accurate.
Yeah.
Like for all of the things where it's like once every 2 years or once every 4 years, you get something and you're like, some people liked it, some people didn't. And now James Bond is going to be like, this is for everyone who has Amazon Prime, whether they want it or not. And it's going to be the new content of the week. And there are going to be a lot of people who are like, I don't like James Bond. I went back and I watched the other James Bonds. Just a bunch of white guys getting laid. And it's like, you weren't ever intended to be the audience. But because it is, and as Barbara Broccoli said, fuck content, we're making James Bond movies for people who want to see them. Hopefully they become cultural explosions like Skyfall. Like, if it makes $1 billion, why is that? Is that because you got an Oscar-winning director to helm a franchise film that has been around for over half a century? That's probably what it is. It's an event, which is exactly what Cubby did. Is he made it an event. It's also what Harry Saltzman did, and he got fired. But like these are the things that they're culminating, and if it becomes just another paper towel out of the roll, and it's just something that everybody gets, and then some Yahoo somewhere says, I don't like this because of X reason, and it's like, well, it was never fucking made for you. Like, it wasn't, Fran. In the same way that, like, so many things are not necessarily for everyone.
Old Man Bird says DJ Playnice could be a Bond actor with that bass voice. Subwoofer could.
Needs more accent. But I do agree, DJ Playnice has a handsome voice.
Daniel's Hot Topic says he gave up on the Bond franchise after Quantum of Solace. So it's the last one he saw. Doesn't like how they rebooted the continuity unless they retcon things and say it's a shared universe.
Huh. I differ in that opinion. I think that you can pepper in the first 25 at your pleasure.
Jet set shit says.
I think honestly, what would have made Quantum Solace better is the missed opportunity to have the traditional gun barrel scene after Bond shot the guy at the cathedral.
Oh, that would have been good. You're right.
You put that there, Quantum of Solace would have been an A+ movie.
Well, let's not go
Well,
crazy, but I like your idea.
Give them a lot more time to edit the movie instead of just 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's always that one element that makes the whole movie work.
Daniel's Hot Topic says, just say James Bond is a code name, and no, and all the Bonds exist in shared. The code name thing doesn't work because it disowns the literary legacy of the fact that that is like a real guy.
Yeah.
And the code name is like a convoluted way for people to try and say that all the movies are related simply because they have the same actors playing M, Q, and Moneypenny. And it's
and also it disrespects Tracy.
Yeah, and then it's like the reason all the Q gadgets make a cameo Die Another Day is just a fun fourth wall breaking joke for fans. It's not meant to say that it's a shared universe, because obviously Bond wouldn't still be that young if the gadgets from the 1962 movies are still around. Yeah, it's just fun. It's kind of
Here's your cell phone. I believe it's your 20th.
It's like when George Miller was making Mad Max Fury Road, and people kept bugging him. Well, is it a reboot? Is it a sequel? Is it a prequel? He's like, it's a Mad Max movie. Just enjoy it. Just take it.
Do it. Exactly.
I just want to have one movie in any franchise where there is no reference.
Yeah.
Sure.
Old Man Bird says in Casino Royale, where they literally right, but really revoked my license to be interested. Although Skyfall had lots of action.
Yeah.
Wait. So he didn't like it because Bond's balls were being hit?
Yeah, well, that was really great torture, though.
Yeah, so what's the problem? There's
no problem. It's just bad. Hey, Ernesto, he supported the channel. Don't be a dick.
I'm not being a dick.
Yeah,
I'm do that also, Eugene, is because that was also in the novel.
Yes.
That was accurate.
Although it was different. I never understood the mechanics.
And it was also a signifier to the audience that, yes, we're willing to do something different and darker with this character. Which is why a lot of people say Casino Royale is the promise that didn't really get fulfilled by the sequels.
Yes.
Daniel says, here's an idea they could do in the next movie. When they bring in the new agent to MI6, we find out the new M is Timothy Dalton, and we find out Bond in 007 is a code name. No. Everybody's going to be distracted by the fact that Timothy Dalton is in the movie and he's not Bond. And I don't think a screenwriter would be able to...
code name Hill.
And I don't think a screenwriter would be able to resist having Dalton make a bunch of fourth wall breaking quips.
You know what? Here's the thing. Daniel's Hot Topics has said things in the past that we have said are absolutely not going to happen.
And they happen.
And they happened. So don't discount him. He said Clooney was going to be in The Flash, and everyone was like, shut up.
Well, that's shared.
He could have said Val Kilmer, and he could have still showed up.
But he didn't. He was right.
Daniel's Hot Topics also follows up saying the story could be that Connery and Moore have been killed, and Dalton's M sends the new Bond to go after and find out how and when they retired Bond.
What are you doing, man? Are you high?
And go after the one who did it.
I remember when
Amazon, hire this man. Sorry, Ernesto.
Nah.
You remember when?
I remember when Kat and I were debating what the next Indiana Jones movie was going to be, and she's like, "Well, they're not going to go back and bring Nazis." I'm like, "Kat, they're going to bring back the Nazis, but how?" Like time travel. And then 2 years later, what do we get, Kat? Nazis and time travel.
Old Man Bird says, you watched the Collider channel. I stopped doing that years ago. I don't really watch them. I mean, I know they revamped a lot and they get a lot more views than they used to when they had that small community, but I don't really watch it.
Is that
I've never
champion?
Oh.
Who do I watch? I don't. Cinema Gulp. I watch Anti-Derivative Jill and the Fantasmagorium show.
Bird says, quoting Scott, "We're looking down the barrel of."
Yes.
Daniel says they can even canonize Never Say Never Again. They could say it was Connery's final mission. It was just a training simulation.
There you go. It's all video games and VR.
Old Man Bird says he saw Eddie Murphy in a movie, A Girl's Neck After Kissing Her. No, not Linda Hamilton. So I tried it with Making Out and it worked. We all need some educational films.
See?
Daniel says,
Boomerang?
Daniel says, well, let me rephrase that Star Trek Wrath of Khan is the best Star Trek, whereas Trek 09 is the second best Trek, and Star Trek the Motion Picture is the third.
I don't know, man.
Praising it as you completely walking it back.
That's not a bad salad. That's not a bad tossed salad.
J.J.
I didn't think you
Abrams
liked Star Trek 09 at all.
Me?
Yeah.
I think it's fine.
Really? I couldn't get around the idea that they tried to take Spock and not have him be Spock and get super emotional in the first movie. Like, what is this?
Well, no, it's not in character, but
movies suck.
My first Star Trek movie on the big screen was the 2009 movie.
Yeah.
And I like that series of movies.
Yeah.
And then I watched Wrath of Khan. I fucking love Wrath of Khan. And the first movie is slow and boring. And I didn't see anything after Wrath of Khan. I tried the first season of Amazon, when Amazon at the time, before they had Prime, they had the first 6 seasons of the classic series, and then I only made it past the first 5 episodes because there was like, man, this is really a product of its time. Goddamn. Gotta go back to it, but I need more patience.
There were 3 seasons of the original show, only 3, not 6.
No, but they had 6 seasons available of Star Trek content. That's what I'm trying to say. But I couldn't make it past the first 5 episodes of the first season because the pacing was like, I cannot make through this. I'm going to have to watch this at another time. And another time never came.
Oh, Daniel says, yes, Scott, I've been going to Stone Road Mall since the 90s when I was a kid, and I love Toys R Us and Cinema One. Go there all the time when I go there, and they have all the Universal Monster movies.
Oh, dude. Well, I got my Blu-ray box set. I haven't got any more. I know I got to see Son of Frankenstein. Anyway, it sounds like
the best store ever for DVDs, he says.
It's a little pricey. You should go to the Beat Goes On if you're in Guelph. You should go to Beat Goes On across the street from Wendy's. That's how you know we're local, is because we're just like, you know where the Wendy's is? You should go across the street.
Daniel's like,
it's by Angel's Diner.
He's like, yeah, what's taking so long to make a new Bond movie? Well, we've hashed that out over the last couple hours.
Yeah, it's a lot of 50-50s.
Daniel says, also make James Bond games great again. I love 007 GoldenEye for N64. Did not play The World Is Not Enough. I love, oh my God, Scotty, if you played 007 Agent Under Fire, that was an awesome Bond game.
Oh yeah,
I played that too, and I don't really remember much about it.
It's kind of vanilla.
But
was there one game where Bond looked like he was the bad guy in the storyline?
That was GoldenEye Agent Under. No, it was GoldenEye.
Rogue Agent.
Yeah, that's it.
I like that game. That was very.
I never got to play it, but I like the cover art where he looks like he's the villain of the game.
Yeah, that was. There were only 8 missions, and each one is much bigger than the last. And I actually liked it. I mean, yeah, it's fan fiction, like Dr. No versus Goldfinger, and you're involved, and Scaramanga made you the gold eye. It's like, I still like that game. I know.
Yeah.
I think people shit on it more so because they felt it was a bait and switch because you're calling it GoldenEye, but it's not really GoldenEye, which is true. But I still liked it. Old Man Bird says comedy gold moments from Scotty 37.
Thank you, Eugene.
Daniel says he loved Nightfire and Everything or Nothing. I love Willem Dafoe as the villain, and he wants revenge on Bond for killing his mentor, Max Zorin. Yes, that was that's right. That is the plot of that game.
The cast of that, like, isn't Shannon Elizabeth in that game?
I think even Richard Keel's in the game as Jaws. Wow. I think he came back to motion capture or something.
I'm just saying, if you've exhausted your books and your movies, go collect consoles and see if you can hunt down your games.
You are right. Don't be sorry.
Of course.
Daniel says, I love the reference in the game when Judi Dench was talking about Max Zorin and Pierce Brosnan said, yes, we played bridge together. He lost. I forgot that. Yes, we get it, Daniel. We get it.
Yes, no, but that was hilarious. You deserve your happy faces. All right, we're coming up on 3 hours.
And we just caught up. That was the entire chat.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody who's tuned in, as we've talked about the optimism and the cynicism and the fears
and the pornographies.
And the pornography.
In any case, it is the end of the longest family-owned movie era in history.
Yes.
We are unlikely to see this ever again.
Yeah.
And if I had anything left in my cup, I would raise a glass to Cubby and Barbara and Michael and Harry.
Absolutely. I don't. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But there is only one thing that can be certain. James Bond will return.
Yes.
Yeah. James Bond will return.
Whee!
Some form or fashion.
Shaken
Maybe a
and
lot of different forms and fashions.
must return shaken, not stirred.
See, that's the thing. Is like even the kids today, they don't drink as much, which I find,
Well, they prefer
Right.
fat these days.
safer.
So,
All right, so we
who's
should
going
we-
to press the buttons?
Yeah.
Don't
Hey,
forget to
Kat,
like,
is
subscribe.
James Bond going to return? Oh, right. No. Wait. Sorry.
Mm. Will you play my? Yes.
Steve, you were going to say.
I was just saying, don't forget to like and subscribe and press the buttons and do all the things. Hit the bell
Yes, we'll be safe, have fun, and rock.
and rock. Yeah. Yes. Colliders is available on Audible. Get to Audible if you want. If you want a free copy, DM us on X, and I'll get you a free copy of that. Also, the new book Beyond the Breach is out wherever you buy books. Barnes and Noble, Amazon. So get that.
Hold it up again.
Up. Beyond the Breach. This is the follow-up to Colliders.
Nice.
Just out. So yeah, check it out. Check it out.
Like a Beastie Boys song.
Anybody else have anything to promote before we leave?
No, I think that's it.
Jill, Ben, here, Ernesto.
Do all the things.
And we will be back hopefully next week with the Matrix Reloaded.
We will reload the Matrix next week. We had a big news day.
We did. Don't get those very often with Bond. So, and we might have a follow-up to this video if we can get friend of the channel, Toby McSpork, to come on like we did for the Man with the Golden Gun video. That would be a fun thing. Oh, thank you. It's a different type of shirt, little cardigan here for sweater. Yes, with a Henley on underneath. Yes.
It's available from our merch store. James Bond will return.